Roger, every microphone on?
Is it up?
It looks like it's up.
Yeah.
But I thought it turned green.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to call the Planning Commission meeting to order. If everyone could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sally, if you could help us with the roll call, please.
Certainly. Mayor Kent Atwell,
Present.
Alderperson Tim Eicher,
Here.
Dave Greenway,
Here.
Dan Jaschinski,
Here.
Ed Merrick,
Here.
Jim Ryer,
Here.
Laura Schultz, here, Robert Weiler,
Here.
and we also have Planner Roger Dupler and Building Inspector Scott Hessinger with us. Thank you. And Attorney Jim Hammes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, the first order of business is a public hearing, number 1. Amend specific implementation plan for Holiday Inn Express. Discussion and possible action to amend the specific implementation plan for DELC 0804-993-003 3030 Gulf Road to increase floor area and architecture modifications to create a fitness center for their lodgers. Is there anyone here to speak to public hearing number 1? Anyone here to speak to public hearing number 1? Seeing none, public hearing number 1 is now closed. Move on to item 1, approve Planning Commission meeting minutes of December 18th, 2019.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay, item number 2 is City of Delafield citizens' comments pertaining to subjects on the consent agenda. Is there anyone that would like to make comments to items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, the consent agenda is now closed.
I'm pretty excited.
Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve all the items on the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Who was the second? Dave? All right. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay. Now we're down to number 4, City of Delafield citizens' comments pertaining to items on or off this agenda. So we have a lot of people in the room tonight, so I just want to go over some ground rules that we use when we have a lot of people like this in the room. Thank you for coming tonight. We're glad you are here. We're eager to listen to your comments on all items on or off the agenda. Please keep your comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. We need to get through this process. We have a lot of people, so I will be keeping a timer, and I will ask you to stop speaking when we get to 3 minutes, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning. Please try not to repeat what others have said. Simply tell us you agree with the comments and add new comments you might have. I see some new faces. We will help you through this process. If you're unsure of something, please just ask. When you come up, we need your name and address first. Then the Planning Commission will listen to what you have to say. They are not allowed to discuss your comments with you. We're here to listen. I'd also like to remind you that reaching out to your alderperson can also be a great first step for communicating and escalating for any concerns or feedback. So let's go ahead and get started. Who would like to be the first citizen's comments? Mr. Dean? I need you to keep your comments.
Yes, I know I have too much time on my hands.
He's speaking on the gun club topic.
Both. Wayne Dean, 3479 Broken Bow Trail, City of Delafield. First, just take a couple seconds on item number 6D. When you're considering the application for a parking lot on Kettle Court for John Barker, just want to remind you, John is a resident of the city and a business owner, has built several buildings on Kettle Court, and I ask that you give him great consideration when he comes up to speak. Second item is on agenda item 5A. I've given you a handout as far as my credentials to be able to talk about shooting. I am a NRA licensed or certified shotgun level 1 instructor. I'm a DNR instructor. I've designed ranges and events for the Scholastic Clay Target program. So when I'm going to take about only 1 minute to show you that most range designers, professional PEs, when they design a range that is within 1/4 mile of residence or where dwellings or buildings could be built, they recommend that a full baffle design down the entire range at a 90-degree angle be built, such that if somebody's standing here underneath and a round is either ricocheted or fired straight up, it's caught by these baffles, these full baffles. And I gave you pictures of other ranges in the area and nationally that have full baffle designs specifically. Now, they say if your ranges are out where you can control some of the shot fall area, perhaps not as necessary. But this is a fully designed range showing where down the range the entire baffle program would help eliminate by the side berms, by the baffles, for ricochets or rounds to leave. This is what the gun club proposes. They want a single baffle design that, though it would create what's called a no blue sky toward the firing range, does nothing to prevent rounds from ricocheting or leaving the range. I'm really suggesting that in the CUP, we make sure that all of the ranges, the rimfire range, the 50-yard, the 100-yard, the West Bay, all of the rifle ranges are completely baffled as recommended by professional range designers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. You'd like to be next? And just a reminder, if you are going to speak to the gun club issue, please state that along with your name and address, because our court reporter is going to be doing her job for people that speak to that topic and that topic only. So we'd appreciate that help.
Sure. Ben Askren, 601 Maple Avenue, Delafield. My wife Amy's here with me. We have 3 small kids, and we now abut that property. I'm actually frankly new to this because I know you guys have been in a battle with these people for, I don't know, 8 years or so. I wish I could add, I wish this was a Q&A, because I'm really curious as to why they can't just go somewhere else. There's plenty of farmland that doesn't have residents like right next door where they could shoot people, which has happened before, obviously. And me building a disc golf course along the back triangle, so that triangle thing at the end is mine, you know, I'm wondering, like, hey, can I even go out there, or am I going to get shot? Because they already shot someone, so I think that's a legitimate concern. So I was wondering if they could answer that for us or no. Is that no? Okay.
I'll remind you we're listening, right?
Okay, so Alderman, I hope you consider that me nor my family nor my 3 young children would like to get shot like the person at the brew house did many years ago. So I hope you guys all turn this down.
Okay. Great, thank you for your comments.
Hello, my name's Joan Zepecki, and I'm here to speak on the gun club issue. My address is N8 W30524 Cherokee Trail. I'm a town of Delafield resident. I've owned my home for 24 years. I purchased my home a few months after the gun club was permanently closed by the town of Delafield, and we lived very happily with my 2 small children for a couple years until the city annexed the property, and we've been at this for a very long time. First of all, I'd like to commend the staff and your attorney for the conditional use permit, the conditional use that they're proposing. I think it's a very good, accurate history, and they've made the point very clearly that in the past, the gun club has never, ever abided by a conditional use permit. They have never met all the conditions that they were asked to meet. And when the city annexed the town in '97, when they annexed the gun club, they gave them a rolling conditional use permit, and they were supposed to have everything completed. When the shooting occurred in 2010, 2011, they still had not abided by any of those conditional use permits requirements. So I strongly urge you, if you're going to grant the permit, to require the fencing, require everything that the city is proposing be done prior to opening, particularly the lead abatement, which I think is critical. We all have wells. It's very, very critical for us to have that lead cleaned up. And my issue is my property abuts the gun club, and their archery targets, they shoot their arrows at my property, and we have gone through and we have had to pick up arrows that were actually on my property. So a fence that is opaque, that would actually stop arrows would be helpful. But again, to really limit the hour of operation, I see that you're asking for 30, you're asking for full baffling, you're asking for full lead abatement. All those things need to be done because they have proven over the years to be unsafe and put us all at risk. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comments. Who would like to be next? Come on up.
My name is John Barker. I'm a business owner in the city of Delafield. This is opposed to the gun club. I apologize for my appearance. I had a little surgery. My face is a little whacked out, but my properties are on Kettle Court East. I have multiple, 3 commercial properties. The triangle that Ben spoke about is actually adjoining my property. My building that I just built last year that you guys graciously approved is that vacant lot at the end of the court where you see the circle. I have that 7 acres right there. There you go, Kent, perfect. And then right next to that is Ben's property. If you take that red arrow, yep, that's Ben's. Now, if you drop that red arrow down and you see that wide open area, that is the rimfire range, 22 caliber, long, rifle, pistol, whatever. My building now is right there, and that range aims right at that building. I have a patio for my employees there. I have all heated sidewalks, heated patio, a safe environment. I spent millions of dollars on that street. $10 million on that street. I came to you guys, and you always have been kind, and you've always lived up to all the rules, regulations, the guidelines, the restrictions, everything. And because I'm a business owner, and I take pride in what I do, I always do what you ask me to do. And therefore, if you go down that street, it looks pretty nice. And I'm proud of what I've been able to build with the people that I've been graciously had the opportunity to work with. The last thing I want to do is have to put them in danger. And if they have to go outside and have a cigarette break or have just a break and have lunch or just go to their car, that is 800 feet from that rimfire range. So my patio sits 800 feet from where they fire. I did a Google Earth search on it today. It is 800 feet. Well, you know, a 22 caliber gun, you discharge that thing, it can go a mile. It'll effectively kill somebody within a half mile. I mean, you know, really, I mean, I guess I totally agree with what everyone else has said here.
1 minute.
And I guess in closing, I think that we all know that it's illegal to discharge a firearm in the city limits. So how can you allow an opportunity for a group of guys who have proven in the past to be pretty negligent in their activity? How can you allow them to have open firing of firearms when you've got community with homes with children, you got people trying to work and conduct business, you've got an interstate right there within range? It's foolish. Have these guys put their money where their mouth is. If they want to fire their guns, build a building like I did. Hell, I'll even help them do it. Build a building, put walls up, fire until your heart's content. Hell, I'll even be a member. I'd love it. But don't do it when you don't have something to protect the bullets from leaving the place. It's
Great.
absolutely ignorant.
Thank you for your comment. No clapping or cheering, folks, please. Please, please.
So I've come up with my neighbor Libby.
Name and address, please.
Gary Ovila. This is regarding the Gun Club, 3423 Broken Bow Trail.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm Elizabeth Finley, 3553 Broken Bow Park.
Why don't you just spell your names for the record, could you?
Hovila.
Could you move the mic closer to you?
So the people in TV land can hear what you're saying.
That's right. How you doing out there? So the reason Libby's up here is her husband is out of town, and we had talked kind of going in that she was going to stand in for him, and I know we had a 3-minute rule, so I guess I'm wondering on the front end here, I'm going to be speaking for Libby and Brian, so do I have 6 minutes? If it comes
Each person gets 3 minutes, so you're 40 seconds into it, so.
All right, come on. All right. Well, just let me add some context. I'm going to comment on the conditional use permit, but I've been a resident of Delafield. I purchased my lot in '95. At the time, I was aware the town owned the club. It was a 14-hour shooting situation. Quite frankly, I didn't find that completely a problem and onerous. Some of my neighbors in the town who had been around a long time, I know they had issues with it. I didn't particularly have the problem at the time. Then again, it was 14 hours a week. The issue that I had as time went on, and some of my neighbors, brought up the fact that there was safety issues in that. Tried to be, supportive of them, but really, didn't resonate quite until the time when the city decided that kind of what I thought calling the cover of darkness came and increased the hours fivefold or fourfold or whatever. I don't know what exact hours, but they increased it, and I developed a complete mistrust for the city. Some of the things that I was hearing about the gun club started to resonate. I had a family and started worrying about the safety issues. So I became kind of indifferent to an opponent. And then when the incident occurred 10 years ago, and a woman and her unborn child, two people almost got killed, okay? And you know that, right?
Just saying you got 1 minute left.
I got 1 minute, okay. The lack of, let's call it discernment on the part of the individuals that are bringing this forth is quite astounding. I think I could speak for a lot of individuals out there that, quite frankly, we can't believe it. But I know you have to deal with it. This is a conditional use permit, perhaps, that you don't want to offer. But there's a number of things in here that I'd like to use Libby's time to go through, quite frankly.
Libby, are you going to speak or no?
No.
Okay, then I'll give you her time since she's up here.
All right, that's so for instance, the lead remediation. So just as read through in the conditional use permit, remediation of the property and remove lead within 6 months following the termination of the CUP is necessary for the health and well-being. So to me, that doesn't really mean anything. So if the gun club gets the CUP, many of them are going to think, okay, we're going to be here for decades. So what this is suggesting that the lead, how much lead is out there now, doesn't actually get cleaned up for, what, decades for our kids? So this, to the extent that this is something that, as you have your further discussions with the gun club, that's a straw issue. That's nothing. That's like saying, okay, who here is worried about the $21 trillion debt that we have? Nobody, because nobody thinks the government's ever going to say, okay, now it's time to pay it. If they don't feel that they actually have to clean up the lead, why do they care? This is really quite honestly has no teeth. It's my comment on that. I think we should clean it up now. I think you should clean it up every 5 years to the extent you could do it. I'm not an expert in that, of course. CPAs don't know that kind of stuff, but that's my feeling on that. The fencing, I can read on this, but to paraphrase, it looks like they're going to propose fencing. You're going to decide is it appropriate or not, and I really don't understand why you don't take care of that now, because you know what they're going to come back with is that orange plasticky stuff, that's going to be their fencing. What I think you need to do is what you find outside of quarries in Waukesha, where you got the 8-foot Waukesha fence with the barbed wire back, significant fencing, and I just don't really understand why you keep that open and why don't you just nail that down. Just to kind of run through this quickly, some of the baffling sound abatement type of things, I know you've done a lot of work of putting the kind of things you like in there, but it opens it up for continued discussion and disagreement perhaps of what this is intended to be. I'd like it kind of taken care of on the front end. Hours of operation. You referenced approximately 30 hours with similar activities at sites throughout Waukesha County. Well, did any of those sites in Waukesha County have members that almost killed somebody? Do they have residents and businesses, that, as we just heard, that surround that same area to the same extent? So I'm not sure you just say because, you give me the 1 minute? Okay. I just don't believe that just because everybody else does it that we have to do it. I mean, we had an incident here in the past. Why not be more conservative? Why not be more restrictive? As far as the hours are concerned, back to the 14, and I know the gun club always goes back and says, hey, we were here first. Well, let's institute the 14 hours that, if we're going to put hours that would exist at the time when I arrived. Just to kind of summarize, I guess I look at what's happening out there in the world right now, and I compare this a little bit to the Boeing and the 737 MAX, where the FAA has said, no, you're going to, the analogy here is you're the FAA. We need you to protect us. There's passengers out there. Many of them are gunners, quite frankly. But the FAA is not going to allow the 737 MAX to fly until they've taken care of things and they tighten things up. And in the past, not most of you individuals, but in the past, things have not been tight. We want things tight. If you have to do this,
Okay,
we want things
I'm
tight.
going to need to stop you there. And thank you very much for your comments and coming tonight and sharing your thoughts with us.
Great. That was it.
Okay, who'd like to be next, sir?
My name is Rick Simmons. I'm a former resident, live at 122 Legend Way in Wales. I was here.
And you're talking about the gun club.
Yes, talking about the gun club. I was here when the gun club had their CUP revoked. I worked with my neighbors, Wayne Dean and several others, and we studied every issue. And let me just, by way of establishing my credentials, I've been shooting since I was 10 years old. I've taken many gun training classes. I'm a veteran. I have a concealed carry permit that's good in just about every state. At the mayor's request, Mayor McAleer, I spoke at this body to get concealed carry allowed in the city buildings. I am an avid shooter, and I've never had an accident with a gun. In fact, when we moved here, I joined the gun club. I shot there twice, and I never went back to shoot. It was then, and I think no improvements have been made, it was then the most dangerous non-combat shooting venue I have ever seen. And as Wayne Dean and I and our other neighbors studied, the gun club then did not adhere to one condition that I'm aware of their CUP, nor did they adhere to any of the guidelines in the NRA range guideline book, which is about this thick. We studied it and we studied it. No responsible shooter will shoot at a hill full of cement and rocks with no backstop to stop things. The lead in the soil is a severe problem. Every aspect of that gun club is a nightmare, an accident waiting to happen. I'm stunned that this issue is still alive. I know they probably have some backing. That stuns me. I don't know what I can say other than to beg you, do not allow them to open unless they meet the recommendations in the now newly proposed CUP. It's just an accident waiting to happen.
Less than a minute.
1 minute. The round strike of the woman at the brew house, the reason that happened is that some member who had no business having a gun brought two citizens of the UP to shoot, I believe it was 357 Magnums, a .45, and an AR-15. They had no idea what they were doing. When the individual fired the .45, there is no doubt that he fired it once, was not aware of how it kicks, and it threw his hand up and he double tapped. That's how that lady got shot. If that had been a responsible gun range, that never could have, never would have happened. It is a mistake to let that rogue gun club go on the way they were. If they're going to be reinstated, they need to be watched and they need to obey the rules.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Who'd like to be next? See you up there?
Hi, I'm Amy Askren. I live at 60 on Maple Avenue, Delafield, and talk about the gun club. So Ben is my husband, and we were talking about that triangle in between my property and the commercial property at the top. You can kind of see a little area where there's like a cleared spot. It's kind of like a circle. It's a big rock pile. My kids sit in that rock pile all the time, and they play with it. They love to pick up rocks. They take them home and they paint them. We spend a lot of time in that area. When we bought our house, I knew that there was an issue back there. There was a gun club, and once I heard that someone got shot, I pretty much looked at my husband and I'm like, well, that's never going to get opened. I mean, no responsible people would ever allow a gun club to open after someone's been shot, right? So we went ahead and bought the house. I guess we shouldn't have. So we got this letter in the mail, and I looked at him and I'm like, there's no way that's going to open, right? I mean, we live here. And then I saw that they were proposing 60 hours a week, and I mean, that's our backyard, essentially. When people are shooting there, that's, our kids are going to hear that, and there's past their bedtime. I'm just thinking, oh, there's bullets flying in our back, potentially into our backyard, and not to mention just the noise, which apparently is not an issue for them. I guess noise violations don't apply. So I guess I would appeal. I don't know if there's people from the gun club here, and my comments would appeal to the people running the show on their side that, I mean, just look around the gun club and see there's families, there's houses, there's businesses. Like, I support what they want to do. I just don't understand, why can't you guys sell it, make all this money, go 10 minutes away and build a beautiful, safe gun club where your neighbors aren't scared for their lives? I just wish that you would kind of give up this fight and move on, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for sharing your comments. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Bob Fleming. I'm with the Delafield Brew House, talking about the gun club. And with your permission, I'll just read my notes from this last week that I put together. I'll keep it under 3 minutes.
Okay. Looks like a lot of words.
Since a major incident from a projectile from the Heartland Sportsman Club hit a customer at the brew house nearly a decade ago, the area has been quiet and much less risky. In the interim, the business landscape has changed dramatically, where barn and outdoor weddings have become a solid growth segment in the hospitality business. We addressed these changes about 3 years ago. The brew house assembled an area on the grass next to the patio where we could sponsor outdoor weddings on the lawn surrounded by Colorado blue spruce and maple trees. This, coupled with a privacy screen built on the east perimeter of the outdoor wedding area, provided a welcome and complimentary addition to the banquet facility that would serve to those that wish to conduct an outside wedding. We purchased a wood lattice wedding arch along with 200 white enamel chairs, numerous flower and plant arrangements to accent the area. The investment has met with great success. In 2018, we booked 6 outdoor weddings weekends. In 2019, we booked 10 weekend outdoor weddings. This month, the brew house has already booked 11 weekends for this year for outdoor weddings, and another half dozen are still in the planning stage for the time period of May until late September. This success was because the customers were comforted by the fact that the gun club was not active for the past 8 to 10 years. We can only guess as to the response when customers hear of the current activity relative to the new CUP. Our estimate is that we will experience most all of the reservations will be canceled when they find out that the noise from the range firing activity will potentially disrupt the wedding proceedings. The amount of lost revenue will be very significant to the brew house, with no options available to recover from this venue. Under the Shooting Range Protection Act, a nuisance action can commence if there has been no shooting activity for a period of 3 years. In addition, many states have implemented a notification of noise that's within 1 mile radius of any approach to the shooting range. That notification is in the form of a prominently displayed sign that has the following inscription on it: shooting range, noise area. If the noise level is not acceptable a mile from the subject range, what is the impact for those residents in commercial buildings that are within 100 to 250 yards of the subject site? We highly recommend that noise abatement items be included in any final recommendation from the City of Delafield Plan Commission. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. All right, who would like to be next? Come on up.
I'm not a public speaker.
It's okay. Take your time.
It's about the gun club. My name is Karen Welkin, and I live at 3325 Broken Bow Trail. My husband and I purchased our home in 2018. Our yard is less than a mile from where there will be shooters. We had no idea about this issue. And we purchased the house because it has a big yard, and it's in a quiet neighborhood. The property is a foreclosure. We're trying to fix it up, so market value is really, really important to us. And we feel that this will be detrimental to our property values going forward. This is unimaginable to us. We just had no idea. We need to have the highest standards of safety, noise abatement, limited hours, environmental protections, as addressed by others here. So I just wanted to put that on record. Thank you.
Thank you. You did a great job. Who would like to be next? Anybody else? Come on up.
Well, I'm not about the gun club, but let's ask those.
Well, yeah, it's for any topic that's on or off the agenda, so come on up. Okay.
And copy for each one of you.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
This is not about the gun club. This is William Wisher, 231 South Latin Peak Road, and it's about item 7B in the agenda, and that's changing the B5 zoning. And I'm here to state my opposition to amending the B5 zoning code 17.3926B to allow inclusion of hotels as permitted use. I am adamantly opposed to modifying this code, which allows hotels as a permitted use, with or without the caveat of a 20-acre restriction. Once allowed, this change abrogates the original intent of the B5 zoning to have low-impact uses next to residential use permits areas. Sorry about that. In case of our residential area, the original intent of this B5 zone of approximately 300 feet in width, paralleling Indian Spring Drive from County Highway C to Latin Peak Road, was to act as a noise buffer of low-impact quiet businesses to lessen the noise impact of I-94 traffic, of which we as citizens agreed to. Proposed ordinance amending the B5 zoning code 17.3926B in this month's agenda is not in the best interest of the adjacent landowners and our neighborhood. Our zoning codes are in place to protect us. This isn't tax-paying landowners in our city from intrusive schemes by various parties. Note, please, today's amended agenda, which is as of 1:28 yesterday afternoon, reflects the inability of this administration to properly follow governmental guidelines to the disservice of us citizens. It should not take multiple phone calls, discussions, and a formal protest for this administration to get the process correct before scheduling hearings and proposing ordinances. And I thank you for your time and attention.
We do the same. Thank you. Okay, who'd like to be next? Come on up. Oh, I was pointing the gentleman in the back. I will let you go next.
My name is Mike Grove, 328 Juniper Court, Delafield, Wisconsin. I'm here regarding the application of Christ the King Lutheran Church for wayfinding signs to be installed. My understanding is the original plans have been rejected by the city because the code is for 8 square feet and our signs are 12 square feet in the 2 signs that are in question. I find our codes to be lacking in clarity. Our wayfinding applications are off-street. I took a walk last night, 5 minutes from here. I encountered 5 signs that I believe are wayfinding. The first up at the Delafield Hotel and ID Fitness. That sign is 4.5 feet by 4 feet, and it's 18 square feet in excess of the code. Chase Bank is interesting. Their sign is 3 foot by 2 foot, 6 square feet. Makes sense because it has one line on it. It says customer parking. The most unique one is the City of Delafield wayfinding sign at Main and Genesee. It's within code. It's 2 foot by 4 foot, but it's interesting. It has not 1, not 2, but 8 different signs directing people to the east, to the west. Very difficult to read because of the size. Sign number 4 is at the corner of Wells and Genesee. It's a 4 by 4, 16 square feet, and it is giving directions to the Salon Spa, Edward Jones, and Jazzercise. And the last is at the post office, a 10.6 square feet sign directing people to the Liberty Park. And it's clear to me that the sign usage in the city is arbitrary at best in terms of the size. I think it's important that this group consider that the aging population at Christ the King, and yes, I resemble that remark as being one of those folks, our signage allows for clarity. It gives plenty of space around the sign, and I would ask this commission to accept our signs as submitted. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Come on up.
My name is Richard Dallin. My address is N27 W30248 Grand Haven Drive. It's in the town of Delafield, but the mailing address is Pewaukee.
And you're speaking to the gun club.
I am speaking about the gun club, yes, sir. First of all, I want to give a compliment to the Daniel Boone Gun Club. They run things correctly and safely. Also, I want to point out some of the people here, when I first talked about the gun club, didn't have as much gray hair as they do now. But I think, Roger, you're the only one I think that was here when I first came here with Paul Craig.
Perhaps.
Paul Craig was he's a great person, he's a great mayor. I came to the Common Council back then because a bullet had almost hit a business owner at New Age and his wife. And there was the president of the gun club at the time was Hickey. I wish everybody here could have seen that meeting, because I'm going to fall back on a phrase called illusory truth effect. Hickey denied any bullet could leave this range. He blamed people in the neighborhood for the bullet that almost hit the business owner. The history of this gun club has been totally irresponsible. For as long as I lived in the city of Delafield, I still have a property in the city of Delafield. They have not been good neighbors, though they say to you that they are. That's the illusory truth effect. And the result is my wife got on TV after a pregnant lady got hit with a bullet. I spoke numerous times to Wagner and WTMJ, and the effect was we had our mailbox bashed in. So the reason I'm up here now, I know the city is probably put in an awkward position through the courts. If you feel you have to open up the gun club, you must ensure safety. Ever since I was 12 years old in scouting and learned how to shoot a .22, that was the top 3 things, safety. This gun club has failed to do that. They elongated their hours to be, I think it was 363 days out of the year, saying they wrote us all letters saying they were going to do that. So it all boils down to the illusory truth effect. Don't believe what this gun club says. Don't trust this gun club. Just because they say it Just because they say nothing is proven wrong that Hunter Biden did in the Ukraine by taking $1 million a year, don't fall for that. Just because they say it again and again doesn't mean it's true. So I want to thank everybody finishing up here. Thank you for doing this. You guys have worked hard on the gun club, everybody here, people prior. I want to thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Who else would like to speak? Who else would like to speak? Come on up.
Yes, the gun club.
Okay.
Mitch Cieslak, 903 Broken Bow Court. I just want to say I agree with the folks prior to me about being against the gun club. And I just ask for common sense. Everybody that's here on this panel, I ask for common sense. You've heard what's happened there, what they've done, what they promised, and what they didn't do when they promised. That is just common sense. We all have kids. We know how to deal with them. Kind of put it in that perspective. It's just simple common sense. Simple things like being a community partner. I've lived here for 20 years. 3 children. I went to Kelmarine High School, the school system. Very involved with the school system. Never once did I see this gun club come to a school program, volunteer, time, money, anything. They're not here for the community, okay? And also years ago, it used to be, we were here first. Well, that's over with. That CUP is done, okay? Times have changed. We need to make changes also. And that is changing this gun club from existing. If there is a CUP, once again, we all have kids. Treat them as such. You get 1 day. You get 15 minutes of operating time. We'll see you in a year. See if you can handle that and manage that. I guarantee you can't. Don't even think about giving them any extraordinary amount of time. Minimalize it. Prove. They have to prove it. The record's terrible. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. All right, who else would like to speak? Anyone else like to speak to items on or off the agenda? Come on up. Okay, thank you.
Troy Duberg, 3526 Broken Bow Trail. Agree with everything that previous speakers have talked about with the gun club, and especially what Mitch has just said. Use common sense. Vote on this like this property was next to yours. Get the full lead abatement. Get fencing all the way around. Have noise abatement. Don't let this club open up until all these conditions are met, because if you do, they're never going to get done. I'd also like to have a provision, if possible, where some of the members could go out and make sure that all this stuff is being done at some point, or hold them accountable so it does get done. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Anyone else like to speak to anything on or off the agenda? Last call. Seeing none. Citizens' comments are now closed. All right, we're going to move on to 5A, unfinished business, items recommended for discussion and possible action. DELC 0825.994, 701 Maple Avenue, Delafield owner applicant Heartland Sports Club. Applicant seeks approval and amended conditional use permit and recommend to the Common Council of the same. Welcome. Thank you guys for coming.
Good evening.
Roger, you want to give us an overview? And
Sure. We're here this evening responding to direction from the court that it affords us an opportunity to once again review the conditional use pending for the gun club. There have been a number of coordination efforts between city staff and representatives of the gun club, and most recently the conditional use red line draft has gone back and forth a couple times. Staff has most recently reviewed it and modified it, and that was the copy that was in your packet this evening. Allow me to touch on just some of the basic concepts that we have proposed for modification. These are listed in a memo that was provided in your packet and also provided to the applicants. Non-commercial status, not unlike many golf courses, we want to restrict the number of visits that a member is able to host for others outside of the membership roster so as to keep that non-commercial status a viable part of their operation and not abuse that privilege. In regards to non-shooting activities, we've taken the opportunity to actually define what those are so as to be able to regulate them more appropriately, and should they elect to modify their business plan of operation, these are the types of things that would fall under that. The social activities, educational activities, and the archery activities are the non-shooting events. The buildings themselves, there are two of them that fall within the 75-foot setback. They are existing. They are somewhat grandfathered in a condition that they do not respect the setback, and therefore, in the conditional use, we feel the city has the right to request or require that these buildings not be used for any shooting activities. In regards to fencing, this is of paramount concern when it comes to public safety. The city insists that a fence is realized around the perimeter of the property. The applicants have contended that in the primary environmental corridor, this would cause problems with the amount of trees. Therefore, the city suggests a 10-foot buffer zone for the fence so that the fence could actually meander around existing trees but still act as a barrier to pedestrians that may wander into the site. NRA Range Source Handbook. Currently, the NRA does not sanction or approve ranges. Rather, they have a list of guidelines for the safe operation and design of ranges. Lacking anything more credible, the city wants to identify their guidelines as identifiable criteria, so we have something that not only us but also the gun club can point at to identify actual design elements and compliance with some recommendations. I might add that there have been no alternative suggestions from the part of the petitioner to come up with any other criteria. Sound abatement, there have been no modifications to the sound abatement to date. I think before the conditional use was previously terminated, they had taken some pretty drastic measures to modify their sound abatement, and as a result, there is no requirement for additional sound abatement at this time. The effective dates of operation, you heard a number of citizens refer to the rolling basis for approval. That's not consistent with the application that was filed with the city, nor is that consistent with the city's concern for protecting the public safety. Therefore, it would be in the city's best interest, as well as the community at large, that all safety aspects are implemented on all ranges before any range is in operation. In regards to the hours of operation, the existing hours per the application may be respected. The city offers a compromise in that for the first 3 weekends in November, that the club be able to operate from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for their deer rifle sight-in operations. Reimbursable fees, they had requested that the city waive their fees. That is not anything that staff nor this body has any recommendation authority. That's purely a council issue. The change in character of the surrounding area, the standard language which we have always had in any of the city conditional uses. Some of the other items that were identified by the applicant for consideration that the city does not want to consider, that is lead remediation. They asked for it to be eliminated. We believe that it's in the city's and the community's best interest if that is indeed implemented. They asked for the fencing to be eliminated for safety reasons. That should not. And they also request special event shooting activity days, which if they fall within their allowable business plan of operation and approved hours, that's one thing, but special events outside of those hours should not be considered. I would like to remind you that the CU is in a draft form at this time. It's this body's responsibility to make a recommendation to council and allow them to make the final decision. Staff has worked pretty extensively trying to get this wrapped up to this point, and appreciate your concern or your consideration of our recommendations.
Great. Jim, do you have any comments before we have the applicant speak?
No, nothing.
Okay. All right, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you and good evening. I'm Stacy Rosenzweig of Hauling and KOSC, 320 East Buffalo Street in Milwaukee, Suite 700. And with me is Mike Sitars of as a representative of the Heartland Sportsman's Club. I do want to thank the city, its staff, for its willingness to work with us and for getting us this far. I don't think we're there yet, however. The club does appreciate the concessions regarding the buildings, and I believe we can assure you that no shooting activity will be going on in those buildings. They're not intended for that purpose in any case. I do have a question, perhaps a point of clarification. Mr. Dupler indicated that the sound, that the requirement for the sound to be, for sound abatement to be enhanced, you indicated that that was going to be removed from the CUP. The draft still includes that in there, so I'm just wanting to clarify what's supposed to be where.
My reference here is that there have been no modifications since the last time that the operation was approved. Whatever is in the CU currently is still enforceable.
I see. Okay, thank you. Then I did not hear that properly as well. All right. Just coming back to a couple of things. This is still subject to litigation, and perhaps when this litigation terminates, we'll have some more clarity on this. But at this point, the way that the gun club has interpreted the prior court orders, and I believe Judge Boren has agreed with this, and I'm aware that the city disagrees, but at this point it's our position that because the CUP was arbitrarily denied in 2013, or that the court found that the denial was arbitrary, capricious, that the remedy was to grant what was enforced and what was requested at the time. And at the time, this club agreed to the modifications. These were moving target modifications. We kept coming back, and my predecessor in this seat kept coming back and said, okay, well, this wasn't an issue here, but all right, we'll bring it up to this status here. And then at the last minute, for instance, we said, okay, we will do no blue skies. And Mr. Den referred to that, I believe, in his presentation during the public comment period. And we said, okay, we'll do no blue sky. And at that point, this body said, well, we can't have no blue sky. That's not good enough. We need military or Department of Energy style security to ensure that a bullet can't possibly leave the range, which we can't guarantee that a bullet isn't going to, we can't guarantee 100% safety on Main Street, but we can make improvements that are appropriate for sport shooting ranges and appropriate in these situations. And we offered those in 2013, and this body said no and denied the CUP, and the court said that was wrong, you need to issue the CUP. And so that's the universe we're working with. And again, we're happy to sit down, we're happy to continue, answer questions, talk, try to work this out, and in the interest of being a good neighbor, in the interest of
Please.
In the interest of compromise and putting an end to all of this fighting, we're willing to work with, and we submitted our comments and red lines in good faith to try to get this to a mutually acceptable solution. So I guess I'm happy to take questions or perhaps defer to Mr. Sitars on specifics of firearms and club operations.
Yeah, I have a question. Long pause there. You mentioned, you referenced sort of a moving target as far as standards go back in the late 2000 knots or whatever you call them, 2009, 2000. Do you take objection to the reference to the NRA gun range safety handbook?
The issue with the NRA gun safety handbook is they don't sanction ranges. These are not, these don't have the force of law. They're not going to sign off on them. And while NRA standards are one possibility, we suggested that that we would present modifications with engineering plans that were approved to a reasonable, that were reasonable and so forth, and that would be approved by this body by experts. Perhaps a compromise. I have not discussed in particular with my client since we didn't get this until very recently, and I've been out ill. Would simply include two NRA specifications or another specification as approved by the planning commission, such approval will not unreasonably be withheld or some such, something along those lines. Because the NRA source book, while it's useful, is not a binding dispositive document.
So my point and question is, by referencing it and having something that is static as opposed to what you just described as an ongoing negotiation, which to me sounds like another moving target is what's being proposed, as opposed to something that is static, which is the NRA handbook, which then would become legally binding because it'd be part of the CUP, right? I mean, wouldn't that be how we'd be building to that standard?
That is a standard, sure, that is something that suggests a standard, but the handbook itself says it's not supposed to be used as a standard. That's our objection to it.
Okay, I'm just struggling with us negotiating to come up with a better one than the experience of the NRA. That's just that's what I struggle with as far as that as a proposal. I know this isn't a negotiate. You've negotiated with staff on that to this point. That sort of clears it up as far as how we settled on that.
I got a question. In your comments, you mentioned that the Sportsman Club cannot guarantee safety. What can you guarantee?
We can guarantee nobody can guarantee safety. We can't guarantee safety in this building, in this room right now.
Well, I'm talking the club, not any other environment.
The club, as and this again might be better suited toward Mr. Saitar's, but the club can, if a CUP is approved and it's one that is in conformance with the court order that Judge Boren issued, subject, that's on appeal right now. If it's one that is appropriate, the club, if they will make the modifications, they will abide by the Range Protection Act, that pertains to safety. They will, the people of the club, they are sport shooters, they're experienced, they will have range safety officers on site as the CUP requires. Like I said, nobody can guarantee that somebody isn't going to go berserk. We can't guarantee that here, we can't guarantee that anywhere. But this is a club of dedicated members and their guests under supervision. And they have agreed to put in the modifications that were on the table in 2013 in order to make the range safer, the no blue skies modifications and so forth. And these are considered standard. These are considered industry standard for shooting ranges. And so.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm trying to ask is, guaranteeing safety. We're listening to a lot of citizens out there, and probably every one of them had a serious concern about safety issues. And I have to agree. I'm an enthusiast. I've been shooting for many decades. I have nothing against the sport. So I just want to make sure that you understand that point. But you have to be safe in your control of that firearm in every step of the way as a person using it. But also the grounds that you're shooting at, especially in this type of an environment, has to take the necessary precautions to assure a high level of safety for everyone around it. If they live there, if they have businesses there, all of those, I feel, are very, very important for the gun club to address above and beyond even what the city would like to see.
And, the club does sympathize with these folks. This club has been there on that site with those ranges since the 1940s. It operated until 2010, largely without incident. Unfortunately, there have been incidents. Point being, these are properties that were next to a gun club when they were purchased. I don't think anybody there has been there since before the 1940s when the ranges were established. And the club, this is probably something better directed to its members than to me as the lawyer sitting here spouting Range Protection Act and so forth. But the club doesn't want these incidents either. The club wants to be safe. The club wants to maintain its membership and maintain its purpose. And the club is very keenly aware that if there are safety problems going forward, that the response is going to be swift and the response is going to be serious. Yeah.
I don't know if I should be then directing my questions elsewhere, but again, it's going to come back to that safety. Where's your line in the sand that you say, that's good enough? And I think that hearing the citizens, and sorry to say, everyone's moved in, the dynamics have changed since 1940. And that's just going to happen in any type of environment where there's a shooting sport facility. This can happen. So, the question is, and I think it's a concern, at least for me and with everybody else that I was hearing, there has to be measures taken from this gun club side above and beyond to assure the highest quality of safety going forward so that everything can move in a forward direction.
And these measures will include, construction to engineering specifications of the baffles as, again, the No Blue Sky was where we were in 2013 and so forth. There will be range safety officers and supervision and things like that. As to the more assuring the community that things are on the up and up, things are safe, that again may be more appropriately directed to its members. They know the community better than I do. I'm the law talking person up here, and they might be able to speak to that. But so I can speak to permitting and things like that. But Mike, would you like to add anything or? No. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jim.
Council, in any kind of resolution, attempted resolution, you got to hear things from both sides. You've heard these neighbors and people, residents who've been in the city today, right? And you've heard Roger Dupler present the city's draft position, and as I understand it, you got a copy of a memo that he sent, I think it's dated January 23.
Yes.
And in that particular memorandum that he drafted, he sets forth certain things that are identified concerning the latest draft of the conditional use permit, things like non-commercial status, non-shooting activities, fencing, building, so forth. Now, at the end, if you might remember, he does cite, quote, there were a number of other changes in the red line copy of the conditional use permit received with the correspondence of January 14. These requests included, for example, a request by the club that the requirement involving lead remediation be eliminated. Did you hear that?
Yes.
All right. And you've heard the folks here talk about lead issues involving their children and efforts to remediate that condition, have you not?
We did.
And so, is it correct in Roger's plan, or Roger's submission of what the plan is for the CUP, a request by the club that the requirement involving lead remediation be eliminated? Is that your position?
The position was that the requirement that it get pre-cleared with two different proposals for remediation and keep an amount on file, a bond on file. I don't have the specific language here. To have that all in advance, that was perceived it's our position that was onerous, that was not in the 2013 discussions, and that's the kind of the universe we're dealing in right now is our perspective. We do understand that if the club causes lead issues, the club is responsible for them, but the way that it was spelled out in the CUP was not, it didn't seem to come from, I'm not sure that's the right way of putting it, but the condition just seemed onerous and unworkable. Again, we're willing to have this dialogue. This is not, we're not presenting this as this is where we are and this is take it or leave it, just as we hope you're not presenting this as a take it or leave it. We've offered to sit down and we've done some redlining, no face-to-face discussions that I think might still be helpful to try to get this moving. But
well, and that's what I'm trying to get at. It's sort of like a mediation process. What are the things we can agree on? What are the things we can't agree on or are not agreeing at the time? So the one that appears to be one that you have not agreed upon is the one related to lead remediation.
As
And
writ-
so what I'm just trying to get at, is there a way to resolve that issue, to get it on the side of things you can agree on from the side you can't agree on at this time, when you've heard people talk about lead remediation and it's a serious problem? And so that, in addition to safety, safety has many component parts. It's not just the shooting of a gun, it's the lead that may be, picked up by kids, maybe something that would be dangerous to their family, and these sort of things. They're concerns. And we are, with the city of Delafield, respecting their concerns as residents, and also respecting the court of law. And so I'm just looking at ways, in answer to your question, if we were sitting down and talking about what are things we can agree on and what are things we haven't but can. And I'm looking at just one example to try to get us into a position where we can agree on something that is practical and is safe. And that's one start, lead remediation.
And I thank you and I appreciate that opportunity. This is something I would probably need to confer with the club a little more on for a specific proposal on that if you're soliciting one.
Well, I think that's a start. So I would suggest, just as one commissioner, that we move into those items that we don't have an agreement on, but maybe we can, and put that side of the ledger where things are that we can agree on gets greater, and the ones we can't agree on get smaller. And we might end up somewhere in between. So let me ask you the next question in here in the plan, and we can pass it on to somebody else. Okay. There's another statement that Roger put in the memo. Requirement for fencing be eliminated, and the requirement for fencing is as proposed by the staff or the city, and apparently according to this memo that the Sportsman's Club wants that fencing to be eliminated. Is that right?
The Sportsman Club did in its cover letter with the red line, did indicate that we wanted the fencing eliminated, but if there were specific areas of concern that we'd be willing to discuss that. If there are specific areas, because the entire property, a lot of it's wooded, a lot of it's has natural features that prevent people from wandering onto the ranges and onto the property generally. And we did have a concern about the environmental corridor as well. But this is somewhere where we can have discussions about specifics that are needed. As for the 10-foot buffer, I have not had a chance to discuss that in any detail with my client as to whether that would be an acceptable substitute or not, so I can't comment on that.
Well, I'm now we have two subjects that perhaps can be the further discussion. Am I right? So that we'd hopefully can get it on the ledger of agreement. Fencing, lead remediation, and you brought out the baffle. Wayne Dean presented an illustration, sort of a diorama of what the baffle is and how successful that could be. And you have to analyze it from your standpoint, and maybe that's a third area to discuss at some point with the city. And so I would suggest, only a suggestion, that we now have at least 3 subjects that are on the side of the ledger, which we don't agree on, but are open to discuss. And tell me one other thing before I jump off here. Besides those that are mentioned in Roger's memo that you saw involving those 2 issues, and I do see there was one involving a special event, which seems to me something that might also be the subject of discussion. Would you agree?
I think so.
And then are there any others that are not identified by Roger as things that you disagree or have some dispute in this memo? In other words, is his memo, to the best of your knowledge, a correct recitation of what their position is? By they, I mean the city, and your position.
Well, I do have just a couple of concerns. The position that we asked for a waiver of attorney's fees is not exactly accurate. We understand that professional fees per the ordinance and per the agreement that we signed several years ago are reimbursable, but it's been our concern that because this has been a moving target, because a lot of effort and time has been expended on perhaps reinventing the wheel when it should not have been, or coming up with new, writing a CUP out of whole cloth when there was a relatively full document back in 2013 that could have been updated. Things like that were our objections. We have lodged an objection to the recent attorney's fee that's being attempting to meet and confer with the city administrator as the ordinance requires, but that's a talk for another day. We're not asking that the fees be waived in their entirety, although of course we would like that. We haven't requested that in full, but we do ask for a notice when there's going to be a fee that's expended. That's when the expectation is that my client is going to be slapped with another $6,000 bill. This is a club that is a membership-based club. It relies on dues, and it has not been operational the shooting ranges haven't been operational in almost a decade at this point. And so its revenues are not huge. That is one reason that we did suggest that perhaps doing a rolling reopen of the ranges as they are improved, inspected, certified or approved by this body or its designee to reopen, to have a rolling ability to do that. The other ranges would remain shuttered until they were improved too. This would help with that revenue problem. This would help with the revenue. It would help attract new members. As the ranges were reopened, it would help get people back in the fold who might have left, retain the members that exist, and would enable my client to fund these improvements realistically. Our concern here is that the way this CUP is drafted right now is it sets them up to fail. And whether that was the intent or the effect, that's a debate for another day. I'm sure everybody's got their views on that. But if they're being asked to pour millions of dollars of improvements into a property all at once, when the spirit, at least, of the Range Protection Act suggests that if when there are ranges, they're operating, if there is a safety concern on one of the ranges due to an incident or to a malfunction or what have you, then the Range Protection Act says that range can be shut down. The rest of them are supposed to stay open. The entire club does not need to shut down. And so and we realize that's looking backwards, not forwards, but in the spirit of that, the law at least assumes that just because one range might be out of commission doesn't mean the rest on a property are problematic. So that's another issue where we have another place where we have some disagreement.
So getting back to my question.
Could we, maybe some other commissioners have a chance to
I just wanted to make sure that, we can define what we're in total disagreement about and not. And it's a nice argument to make, but my concern is what is it in Roger's memo further that you disagree with? And I know it's attorney's fees. That's not a surprise.
As an attorney.
I'm an attorney.
Okay.
In case you didn't know.
So if you don't want to use the NRA as the standard, what standard?
Well, the NRA is a guideline.
I understand that, but it's a standard.
It's a guideline.
And you don't want to use it.
We are
What
using
do
it.
you
We
want to
will
use?
it.
Okay, that's all.
If you're agreeing to use it, then we'll.
Yeah.
If you're agreeing to use it.
We never contested that.
Well, if you're agreeing to use it, then we don't have an issue.
It's a guideline.
Okay.
Just like if you go down the street and you're doing 45 and a 60, you might be unsafe driving because of the weather conditions you get ticketed for. But, there's no.
It's not in contention that
Right, if
the
that
NRA standards are to be used.
It's not a standard, it's a guideline.
Guideline.
Okay, then perhaps our issue at this point is semantic rather than practical, and we can move on.
I had a question about something that I believe was contentious last time we deliberated with the gun club, and that was about these lists of members and their guests. The city has the right to review those, correct? Does that become a public record? No,
at the request of the club, staff modified the requirement that the list be maintained and open for inspection but not be copied. So it's not a public record that would be available under the open records statute.
And that was consistent with our request. We did, I think, ask for the language to be redlined to suggest upon reasonable notice.
We accommodated that
and
request.
That was accommodated. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's a point of agreement we have.
Who does the inspection to make sure that everything is met?
I'm sorry.
If we're trying to come up with conditional use, who does the inspection to make sure all the criteria are met?
That's myself.
That's yourself?
And Scott would appropriate.
I think, there's a procedure set up in range protection for that. I don't know if we could use those guidelines.
Could you please use the microphone so we can hear what you're saying?
I think that was just a comment to me, but the 895.08 does refer to continuing operations of a sports shooting range where there has been an ordered shutdown. They do talk about those who are qualified to evaluate the safety of a sports shooting range. There's allegedly a DNR or similar registry of these folks who are qualified, and that's something we could consider as well if an independent inspector is needed.
But that has nothing to do with where we're at today.
But if that, okay, are you?
Statute could be used as a guideline.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, okay, because we've had a lot of discussion about this, and I sent you a letter on, I asked you, look, the range law that you referred to applies to ranges that are operational, and once the conditional use permit is issued and the range becomes operational, the protections afforded by the statute may well apply. But we're not at that
Right.
point.
If we're talking about just inspections that to get them up and running, then I do believe that does fall under the purview of the city. So.
And that's why that's what the conditional use permit is intended to address. And just so we're all clear on this, to keep this in perspective, there was a draft conditional use permit which we talked about in October. Plan Commission made requested changes. We changed those. I sent them out on November 15th. We were going to talk about this in November. You asked to be put off to December. You asked to be put off to January, and we're back here now. And then January 14th, you sent me and staff a red line change. We met and accommodated or included some of those changes, and that's what is in front of the Plan Commission tonight. And I think as some commissioners have tried to clarify, we've accommodated most of your changes, and I'm trying to, in my mind, keep where we have differences. You want special shooting events in addition to the deer rifle sighting that staff has recommended that we accommodate. You don't want any lead remediation. And you want additional hours of operation beyond that which is allowed in the permit, including the deer sighting. Those are the major differences.
Well, again, we didn't say no lead remediation, but as it is right now is unworkable.
Well, as it is, what do you mean? It's okay, explain why it's unworkable. It says the club presents 2 plans to remediate, and we will move forward from there. So what is unworkable? I mean, I understand, if you can articulate why it's unworkable, I think the staff and certainly the Plan Commission can work with you on it. Why is that unworkable?
I think the portion of it is the future-looking things where we need proposals for what it's going to look like when years in the future. The way I read this to suggest what's this going to cost when this CUP expires, which again could be 40 years from now, it could be never, and there needs to be a letter of credit or a performance bond or something to hold that. I'm not sure how that is workable.
Do you have an alternative?
At this point, I do not, but.
Thank you.
So again, I agree, well, I understand what Attorney Hamm has said as far as a back and forth, what was proposed. We got it, reviewed it, had changes. You got it, reviewed it, suggested changes, and we incorporated some of those in. And, I'm going to go back to when I had the opportunity to hear the application back, I think it was 2013, my date might be wrong, but when we were put in the position of being the expert, it wasn't, I don't think, what our role is to be ballistics experts, because back then it was in front of us, and I asked a simple question about the trap shooting range, and under normal operating situations with a novice shooter, would shot leave the grounds, and the answer was yes. Possible. And I said, well, that's not acceptable. And the response back, well, what would you like us to do about it? And that was really late in the stand, in the process. And we were being asked to like modify it ad hoc as experts. And I like the work and I think it's very responsible that the staff did and the committee did to help put this together, because we're leveraging experts that we'll both agree are experts, and that's literature and recommendations from the NRA as a staple document here to deal with the safety and how the ranges are set up. And we're referring to OSHA and the EPA as far as the environment. And earlier you said you're equally concerned about the environmental corridor, and this is a good way to prove that. So I think we've taken this, the doubt and the moving target piece out of this by leveraging those types of experts in this document. It seems very complete and responsible to me. And I'm not sure what you're asking us to do, because I think this has gone through very diligent due process to date. Yeah. I mean, I've got a couple questions about some wording, but they're not for you. So I just wanted to state those points.
I have another comment about any improvements. You don't want to do those up front before, say, the day you reopen the gun club. Let's say it that way. You prefer to do any of these modifications on a rolling basis. Based off of what I'm reading here, it shows that hasn't worked in the past. So the concern I would have is what assurances would we have, aside from saying you can't open until all these changes have been made to meet the conditional use permit, have been met prior to the grounds being looked at and approved for opening for business, say? What assurances can we have then?
Well, the assurances would come from one range at a time. There would be an assurance that this range has been brought up to code. Mr. Dupler would, or his designee would inspect and sign off on it, and it would operate. And then the next one would start. And you do have the hammer of being able to terminate a CUP if it's not if there is not substantial compliance with it, and that, I guess, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, as that saying goes. And I think that's the assurance that if these things don't happen, you can bring us back before this body and move to terminate the CUP if things don't work out. And I don't see how that's different from if they're not, the club isn't going to resume shooting on a range before that range has been approved for shooting. I can make that assurance. Right now, the buildings may be used for non-shooting activities. I don't think anybody has any problems with the club itself meeting in a building quietly, having an educational event that does not involve shooting. That's not a safety issue. I don't even think that would be a concern of the folks sitting behind me who have expressed their concerns that people could come in and meet, have a potluck, sell Girl Scout cookies. But prior to approval of upgrading of the ranges would not open. We're asking that happen one at a time instead of all at once.
So you would be okay if a schedule calendar is set and said, okay, range 1, you have from this date to this date, and after that, you haven't met the conditional use permit, now we have to shut things down. This is what you're kind of alluding to then, is saying, because if you have an open timeline, there's nothing that's going to assure the gun club is meeting those requirements that are being set forth.
But at the same time, if a range has not been improved, there will be no shooting on it. So I'm not sure what the commission's concern is there. If the club operates with 1 or 2 ranges that have been approved for safety open indefinitely, I'm not sure where the concern is.
Well, but you said repeatedly, including in writing, that the sports shooting range statutes preclude the city from regulating the range. Isn't that inconsistent with your statement that if you don't comply with the requirements of the conditional use permit, that the city can revoke the permit and shut the range down?
Under certain circumstances, I did indicate the city is not pursuant to the Range Protection Act, ordinances related to shooting within city limits, ordinances related to noise. Those sort of ordinances are not enforceable against a shooting range. It does not mean that there are no regulations across all space and time that cannot be enforced.
Well, what about the provision related to hours of operation?
The Range Protection Act suggests that hours of operation occur between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. I believe it is, or 10 or 11 p.m. And outside that, the city is not allowed to regulate them. However, in the interest of compromise and getting this done, we were willing to work with the city on this.
I don't know what that means, frankly. You're saying that under the sport shooting range statute, the city can only regulate between 11 at night and 6 in the morning. So if the city issues a conditional use permit on a rolling basis, as you're asking for, are you going to then take the position that if you don't comply with the other requirements on the other ranges, that you can continue to operate and that the city has no ability to regulate those hours? I'm trying to understand your position.
I think if we incorporated it into a CUP that we agreed to, it would become more of an operation of contract and so forth. But the club is not going to be shooting on ranges that have not been opened. And that's, I think.
But I don't think you've clarified, at least not for me, what you mean by the Range Act and how that's going to apply once we come to some agreement. That's where I'm confused.
Under 895.527, that's a portion of the Range Protection Act, and it sub 6, a city, village, town, or county may regulate the hours between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. that an outdoor sports shooting range may operate, except that such a regulation may not apply to law enforcement or the armed forces or other people that don't apply here. So by the black letter of the Range Protection Act, the city can tell us we can't shoot between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. The club is volunteering to restrict those hours to, and I think we're having two different conversations, one about the closed ranges, one about the hours generally. So please correct me if I'm going in the wrong direction from what you're asking. But, the city is willing to abide by these rules. Or excuse me, the club is willing to abide by the hours of operation that it agrees to, that it's, if it reopens subject to a CUP, this is a goodwill gesture. And I do think it becomes, if it becomes agreed to, it becomes a contract. It becomes,
But I thought I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, that once you're allowed to open, your prior statements have said that you're going to operate under the Range Protection Act, and that this agreement, whatever we would come up with, may not apply.
that I believe is a misinterpretation of where I'm going with this. The club is not going to operate outside the hours that it is permitted to do so. I refer to the Range Protection Act perhaps as a guideline, and perhaps, if we wanted to push this issue that, look, this city is not allowed to regulate this all in court, we probably could, and we're not going to. We're willing to put this in the CUP, and perhaps the CUP could state something specific about this club specifically agreed to these hours as a condition of this, and I don't see a court looking and saying, well, they agreed to it, but now we're not going to enforce it.
But isn't this a moot point? If the conditional use permit requires all of the improvements to be done before you operate, then this whole discussion is moot, isn't it?
What do you mean? If they require all of the improvements to be taken care of and done and established before they operate, it's likely setting my client up to fail because they can't afford to do that. That's where our problem with that is. It's just a matter of this is an unrealistic plan that.
It's unrealistic because of the financial condition of the club.
Correct, and
How many
that's-
members does the club have, Mike?
Do we have to divulge that?
You don't have to, I just
No.
asked. Okay.
I'm going to go back to that rolling basis real quickly. In a lot of cases, when a business opens up, there's a conditional use permit that goes along with it. It has to be properly looked at by the city and by other officials to make sure that everything is in line. Now you're open. How is this any different?
This is something that is easily phased. This is something that,
Not to interrupt, but how is the gun club itself? Phasing is, that's not what it, how is the gun club itself any different than any other business that opens up?
well, first of all, it's a gun club. It's been a going concern for a long time, but I'm not sure that, and maybe this is the wrong question, but if the city is approving a restaurant to open and it says we're going to offer eventually breakfast, lunch, and dinner, does it require that it open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., or does it allow them to first open at 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. and then add breakfast later? I mean, these are, this is also, these ranges are, again, it's easily phased, easily partitioned, and I don't see a need to look at this as an all or nothing thing because it's an all or nothing business. By defining this to include, everything has to be done before the club can open at all. That would suggest that the club meetings can't occur on land that they own, simply because all of the ranges haven't been done. And I don't think anybody is intending to tell them they can't sit and have a conversation and some coffee in an enclosed space. But that's.
Do you understand I'm saying open for business? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, if a business owner wants to meet at the facility that they're building, I think they're completely okay to come there and see how things are going. Speak with maybe their partners or somebody else like that. That's not the issue. We're talking open for business, and I just want to make sure that are you asking for the gun club to be treated differently than any other business for a business plan of operation, for your conditional use permit? Are you asking for those as being something that you are asking for consideration?
We're asking for consideration. I'm not. This is a unique business within this city, and I don't think this is something where comparables to a restaurant or to anything else apply. I mean, if somebody was trying to come up with an outdoor mini golf, arcade, go-karts, would the city require that the go-kart track be operational before the mini golf and the arcade can open? Perhaps they would, perhaps they wouldn't, but at the same time, this isn't. It's not something where I think the city has a strong interest in having several ranges open or none at all. I do think that this becomes very workable. It also gives the city an opportunity to see, yes, this is working. Yes, this is safe. Yes, this is this has been done according to plan. Yes, the club has abided by the rules so far before it gets too far. So it also protects the city in that way.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Any discussion amongst the planning commission members for additional alterations, or are we looking at a motion?
Well, I have a question to clarify something. It's on page 37 of the packet, but this is in a memo. This is in Roger's memo on January 23rd. And talking about the non-commercial status.
I'm sorry, what page is that?
It's on page 37 of our packet.
Okay.
It says that it uses language about the number of guests a member may invite to the club is limited to not more than 4 per year in order to preserve the non-commercial and membership status of the club. And in the agreement, it says something different. It says you can't invite the same guest more than 4 times in a year. So I'm assuming what we're going off of is the redlined, updated packet, not just that different. Okay.
Yes.
So it means that we're not limiting a guest, a member, to having 4 guests in a year.
No.
We're limiting a member to have the same guest only appear 4 times before they're either a member or they're stopped coming.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. All right. Good.
I will be abstaining from any discussion or vote.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any provision for?
Dave, please speak up.
Is there any provision for
The yearly inspection to make sure that the things that are implemented remain maintained?
There is not on the city's part. I do know that in their guidelines, in their charter, I guess, for their membership, they are required to have posted all of the rules. And within that, I believe it identifies, doesn't it, Mike, that yearly inspection is part of that.
Inspection by who?
By city, that we're allowed to.
Plan of operation.
According to
For
your
plan,
rules.
yeah, plan of operation.
So would you repeat the question?
Within the guidelines for operations and the club's charter. It requires, you can't have alcoholic beverages on the ranges, and, all of your rules. There's a provision, and I'm just doing this from memory, I have to apologize. I believe there's a provision in there that the range can be inspected by the city on an annual basis. Am I remembering that correctly?
I think you might be, yeah.
Okay. But we can certainly research that, and if necessary, put that hard language in.
If we're putting in sound baffles, if they deteriorate, they have to be, you gotta maintain them.
Sure.
Okay, any modifications to the agreement? If not, we're probably, go ahead, Joe.
I have one suggestion. I thought Wayne Dean's presentation of the baffles was instructive, and I don't know if that was part of the original draft or could be included into it, but I thought it was very well presented and deals with the safety issues, and I did pose the question to council if that was something that they would want to look at, and I think she indicated yes.
Unless I'm missing, so the baffle system that Mr. Dean referenced is on the diagram on page 10 of the conditional use permit.
And that's the same as which was presented today.
Yes, that was a visual representation of what's in the agreement.
That was, what Mr. Dean presented, right. Visual representation of the depiction from the NRA standards on page 10 of the draft conditional use permit.
Well, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yep.
Now, I'll just add some feedback on the fence. I think it's absolutely necessary. I don't think it's practical to think that woods are a successful deterrent for having children wander deeper into them, and it actually could exacerbate such mischief into walking right out onto a firing range if they're not there. But we also had a citizen comment about definition of the type and trying to pin that down. I think the language in here is really solid as far as how we go through and kind of cooperatively design that together, because it's very likely terrain could have dips in the hill or kettles where you might need 10 feet of fence there, and you might need 6 on a different section.
Have you been on the property?
I have not been. I've been in the backyards adjacent to the property, yes. I've been on the border of the property. I've never been in the gun club.
Okay. I can tell you, from a staff standpoint, when we were looking at this, the idea, and that's what the draft provides, is that it's up to the club to present a design, and then the planning commission will review it. But the concept was similar to, it's to prevent unwarranted intrusion into the property, just like along the interstate system. You have a fencing system. It isn't intended to be a barricade or whatever, it's to prevent intrusion, and so it was up to the club to present something that meets that requirements.
And we gave the 10 feet to allow it to meander between trees and so forth, so you wouldn't have to remove trees, which was a modification that we felt was reasonable to ease the installation of the fence.
So you're saying we can remove trees?
No, I'm saying the purpose was so you could meander through trees without having to remove them.
Have you been on the property?
I have not been on the actual property, but like Commissioner Eicher, I've been in backyards and surrounding property.
Okay.
So I have one other question. We talked about the items we may have a disagreement on and moving to the other side of agreements, one of them with the fencing. Have you submitted a proposal on fencing?
We have not, and one
Do you have
was-
a plan?
One was not requested, so, at this point, so.
We'll make a plan.
We can submit one, but we haven't been asked for one yet.
So this has been going on for this whole time and you don't have a plan for fencing?
I don't think in 2013, fencing, it was floated but never was decided, and there was,
In
yeah.
2013, or 2011, 2013, fencing seemed to be impractical around the whole property. And again, have you been on the ranges?
Have I been on this
Been on
range?
the pro- on the
I have not
property?
been on this range.
Well, what we're talking about is we have berms. The berms are fairly high. You'd have trouble walking up them on either side. And fencing would probably be more appropriate around the individual ranges rather than the property. The rest of there's no shooting on the whole property. I mean, you know, there's designated shooting areas, and there's no shooting on the areas that are adjacent to them. So, I mean, if somebody walked in there, it's not a hazard.
But this draft has been out here for months, and just so we're clear on this, there's no alternative proposal or alternative to this recommendation.
We'll give you one then.
Not me, Plan Commission, number one, but I'm saying this, we've been talking about this for literally years, but certainly months, and there's been no alternative presented to this recommendation at this point. I just want to make sure that's where we're at, right, Council?
That is the point we were at. We did offer in our letter on the 14th, I think it was, to, if there are specific areas that you believe require fencing, where the natural berm doesn't provide a sufficient deterrent, we'd be open to putting fencing there. But we could come back, we could certainly come back with a plan for this, to meet this section.
Well, I think the section speaks to the fact that that's what it's asking for as a plan. So, I mean, I really don't see any reason to delay moving this forward. I'll make a recommendation to approve the CUP for the gun club as presented.
Recommend to council.
And recommend to council of the same.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, we're going to go to, Jim, are you staying the whole time, or you want me to jump to the last item for you?
Give somebody else a chance.
I want you to be here for the last item. I'll just move it up.
Give somebody else a chance to say something.
Okay.
Second.
All right, so I'm going to jump
Just totally.
to 7A, zoning and ordinance revisions. Item recommended for discussion and possible action. Discussion and possible action to notify the Common Council that the Planning Commission is exercising its authority under Section 17.872 of the Municipal Code of the City of Delafield to initiate the process to consider proposed changes to portions of the City of Delafield Municipal Code 17.145, fences, walks, and hedges regarding fence style, location, and processing, and portions of the City of Delafield Municipal Code 17.24, definitions regarding the definitions and regulations of fence.
Before you get started, we have those people step
Yeah.
outside.
Folks, we need to move on, please forward.
Yeah, I can't hear.
Can't
close the door, but I gotta get them to
move.
Yep.
Can't close the door, so if you guys move up.
Thank you.
So looking for somebody to, if appropriate, to go ahead and make that motion verbatim, and a second, and then we can have discussion.
What motion are we making?
This is number 6.
Yeah, did we skip ahead?
I jumped to 7A. 7A. 7A, jump to 7A.
We jumped to 7A?
Oh, this is the
You're fast.
fences walk.
We're trying to save legal expenses.
Yeah. We're trying to be efficient with our legal
Ordinance revision.
money.
I thought I nodded off.
This is the proposed text amendments to the ordinance in regards to fencing. Scott, do you want to address this? Okay. What's been included in the packet is just suggested changes to the text. that takes into account what an actual fence is and how we interpret it here in the city. This redefines exactly what a fence is, how it is processed, now including the requirement to submit a survey along with it, so we can be assured that fences are on the property that we expect they are. It gives a little bit of description of the types of fences that we will allow. This is language proposed for your consideration. If you'd like to make any recommendations, feel free. Otherwise, this will go to the council for their action to refer it back to the Planning Commission to conduct the public hearing. So at this point, if you have any requested changes to the text, we'll gladly incorporate that. But you can expect to see it again perhaps next month.
And this is a little different process than we've used before. That's why I'm asking, Jim to stay in case we need additional information as to why we're using this process. Basically, if you choose to take on this endeavor, we're recommending to council, and then council will kick it back to us. Then we would schedule a public hearing and move forward in that direction, which is different than we've done it in the past.
Well, I certainly think the changes are necessary, so I will make a recommendation to the Common Council.
If you could read it verbatim, I've been asked.
To notify the Common Council that the Planning Commission is exercising its authority under Section 17872 of the Municipal Code of the City of Delafield to initiate the process to consider proposed changes to portions of the City of Delafield Municipal Code Section 17145, fences, walks, and hedges regarding fence style, location, and processing, and a portion of the City of Delafield Municipal Code Section 17.24, definitions regarding the definition and regulation of a fence.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there discussion? Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay, 7B, discussion possible action to notify the Common Council that the Planning Commission is exercising its authority under Section 17.87, number 2 of the Municipal Code of the City of Delafield to initiate the process to consider a proposed change to Section 17.3926B of the Municipal Code of the City of Delafield to incorporate hotel into the list of permitted uses in the B5 Office and Research Commercial District, and request that the Common Council submit the proposed amendment back to the Planning Commission for consideration as required by Section 62.23D1 Wisconsin Stats.
I have questions.
So we need a motion and then a second, and then we can have discussion.
I have questions.
All right, well,
I'll make a motion. so I
I'll
can do
motion
my
to
questions.
deny the inclusion of hotels in B5 zoning.
I second.
Now we can discuss.
So you're moving not to refer it to the council?
Well, I'm worried about proper process here and who initiated this.
We're in discussion.
And
I did.
I didn't see a petition. I didn't see,
I'm sorry, Laura, you seconded, correct?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't see, there's supposed to be a map of exactly where this was supposed to be done. I don't have any information, is what I'm saying. There was no information in the packet except for this B part. And in the ordinance, it states that it can be initiated, of course, by the Common Council, Plan Commission, or by petition of the property owner. And when it originally came to this packet, there was no petition from anyone in it. So I'm worried that there is a lack of due process here.
Well, okay. I'd like to remind the Planning Commission that we discussed this thoroughly in August, where many of these issues were evaluated and direction was given by this Plan Commission to process the request for rezoning along with the general development plan proposal from the developer.
But-
That general development plan proposal has not yet been produced. The opportunity for consideration for modifying the zoning text was necessary to wait until after the council had taken action to change the comprehensive plan and the existing zoning before we initiated conversations on this. In regards to publication and notification of the actual public hearing, staff is reconsidering our process that we will need to modify, and that's why we have this evening retracted and canceled the public hearings for this evening. We'll be implementing revised process from this point forward.
Okay. The problem with that is when it was first presented, it was presented as a 2-story, 60 to 90 room hotel. Now it has changed where you want to make it so that it is only going to be a smaller building, but on a 20-acre part of a B5 district. Okay, so actually what you're asking for with this proposal is to put an island in the middle of B5, which according to the law is spot zoning.
All right, I'm confused.
And you did not ask the person who is doing this development if they are agreeable to this. So to me, it's a waste of exercise because there is no representation here from MSI. They have not been informed. They're not sitting here saying, we want this or we don't.
Laura, the applicant submitted a letter requesting this prior to the August Plan Commission meeting when we last discussed this.
I did not see that letter, and it should be in this packet for information for us. Going back all the way to August, this is January.
In regards to the specifics that you are citing in regards to the building, we don't have an application from them to even identify what building they're proposing. For discussion this evening is our consideration whether or not it's in the city's best interest to consider this use for the zoning district.
Okay, I disagree with putting something from a B6 zoning district into a B5.
Okay, so, look, and I'm looking at your ordinance now, all right? Section 1787 sub 2 provides that a change or amendment may be initiated by the Common Council, by the Plan Commission, or by petition of one or more of the owners.
Correct.
And then if you have a petition, it requires all of that information.
Right.
So what's on the agenda tonight is not a petition by a property owner. It's a request by the Plan Commission to amend it. So the petition language and all of that information doesn't apply. It's not a petition. I mean, we all know that this is essentially ultimately a request by a specific proposed development, but the way it's listed on the agenda tonight, unless I'm missing something here, it would be a request by the Plan Commission to the Common Council that the Plan Commission is initiating this request. Forgetting, and the petition language is irrelevant to this particular action tonight.
So what you're asking for from the Common Council is a petition to allow Plan Commission? Or you're asking, or the issuance of a petition?
No, the motion, the item on the agenda is, this is to notify the Common Council that we, the Plan Commission, want to initiate an amendment to the B5 zoning that would allow hotels within this district. All right?
Okay. So it's...
And then, okay, now, and then it goes to the Common Council. The Common Council may say yes, and here they draft an ordinance that allows that, sends it back here, and you have the public hearing. That's where we're at. Now, alternatively, a developer could file a petition asking for that specific language and include all of this information. And even though, you know, that's probably the end result in this case, that's not the process that's being followed tonight.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, the motion is the motion.
And I understand that, but to elaborate on my denial as a resident of that area, and if there's a way to allow a small hotel for the purposes they elaborated to us back in whenever that was, I'm not necessarily against that if we can tie it through conditional use. My concern with putting this item in here, hotels in B5, is redevelopment. People don't think about that. If we could tie that hotel to the existence of the hospital and the elderly housing, which they said they wanted that for, so at such time that those entities leave, the hotel is done.
Yeah.
But I'm very concerned about, I think that was never intended to be in B5. And if those entities disappear and then another hotel pops up in that 20 acres and another hotel pops up, we've got a corner of 2 or 3 hotels, never intended for B5 zoning.
Don't we have other zoning ordinances where we're stating that certain uses are contingent upon other uses, like auxiliary uses?
Right.
Like you can put up a.
We could put that in.
We could, so that's where, I think, and I agree with the
But
premise
this
that.
is pretty open-ended then.
But it's,
I like what you're saying, Tim, if we
Yeah.
can tie it to that.
so is this, so.
We would.
To question this, are we asking the council to draft an ordinance change to send back to us that just simply includes hotels in B5, and then we're open to massaging it into whatever kind of contingencies and parameters we want to
That's
put
my
around it?
understanding from staff.
'Cause I think
This is the
that's-
proper way to do that.
My question is, can we do it without putting it on that list? Can we allow that hotel
I don't think
without
so.
putting it on this list? This is a suggested list of things we allow in B5 zoning. Can we tie, under the conditional use, can we tie that hotel to the hospital and the elderly housing? At such time that those don't exist anymore, that we are not going to allow another hotel to go up on that property.
And I don't want to speak for you guys because you're the experts, but I mean, to be able to do that through the conditional use, it has to be allowed by, it has to be an option in the zoning.
Yeah, there's no conditional use in
Correct.
B5.
Yeah, and Laura has pointed that out in the past. That's why this was seen as a legitimate path to achieve this. There's also, in the memo that I supplied to you, a suggestion for other restrictions that could be implemented and added to this language. And that is limiting the number of rooms, prohibiting the use of implementation of a restaurant,
Sure,
banquet
I get
facilities,
that.
outdoor activities. Those are all suggestions that can be added to this language that you can send to the.
So my
send to the
concern is, if they were to, I guess, I see a path for another hotel going in there.
I don't understand that. Say that again.
Because there's more B5 that's.
It's
that's
20
ready to be
acres.
developed.
If
I don't believe there's any other B5
Yes, there
that's
is.
over 20 acres.
Well, there's not over 20
Not over
acres, but
20.
you
So that's
can't
specifically
do
what
that.
this is too.
Sure you can. We do it with regulating chickens.
We're creating an island.
No, I'm telling you, you can put a size limitation on development. You have to have a minimum size to raise chickens in the city. I mean, there's very simple, it's all over our ordinance. I'm struggling with why it would be unreasonable to just advance the topic, because we can put all the parameters, we can strangle this to death and kill it if it comes back to us and we don't like how it ends up. I mean, I think it's sensible to move this along to the process to get sent back to us in the proper way, so that we can discuss the idea of a hotel in B5, because right now we can't, I don't think.
And again, you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes back, I mean, we have the ability to put all the qualifications on it that we want.
Well, and I think there would be.
It's not like it's coming to us in a final form. I mean, when it comes back to us, we add anything that we think the council, if they choose to do anything, has missed.
Well, I think that's instructive also to the extent that Laura has raised the issue about the developer, and obviously the developer's not here. But if you had it on for a public hearing, the developer would then be notified of that hearing and provide some input prior to and at the hearing, which may be instructive to the rest of us on any restrictions, limitations, or auxiliary purposes that would be served by that type of building as a hotel, and maybe be described as a different name than a hotel.
Well, the
And it's not a
neighbors-
casino,
yes,
Laura.
Right. The neighbors have suggested like a Ronald McDonald type thing.
Right,
House.
yes, like Kathy's house, Ronald.
Right,
Yes.
right, like
And
that.
so, just
it's
the
not a
name
hotel.
sometimes can be very good for the public and for the purpose that you're trying to, in spirit, accomplish.
So instead of hotel, we put something else in there?
Yes.
In that wording?
Lodging
Well,
facility.
I'd be a little more amenable to that.
These are all things that can be changed. We
But
need a
again, I keep
process.
going back to redevelopment, 20 years from now. Things are failing over there, but that hotel's doing all right. Let's put another hotel on there. As long as it opens the door, because it's in that list.
Right.
That's what concerns me.
And that's what the neighbors are concerned about. It's the future. This has been a long.
So if we can call it, if we can, I don't know how you define that as something other than a hotel. Does lodging really change?
Well, it also could be a
What you can put in there?
TBD, to be determined.
I mean,
A B&B.
Yeah, well,
we gotta
I'm
be careful
saying
how far we
lodging's
go with this.
the
but
exact
if the condition is
definition
that there
and
has to
condition
be,
determined later.
if there has to be an operating hospital, if there has to be an operating, other memory care facility, if there has to be an operating, then you can, I just want to make sure that there's all sorts of qualifiers.
I totally understand.
Because I don't
that.
want multiple
But just the
hotels
word
over there.
hotel on this list can invite other developers into saying, a hotel is included in B5 zoning. And
No, it would only be for this parcel because it's over 20 acres.
And that would bother me if another one came in on that 20 acres.
But they'd have to have a hospital, they'd have to have a memory care facility, they'd have to have all those things to be able to
Not according to
access-
this.
Well, we haven't gotten that far yet, right?
I understand on the conditional use, you can create all those, but just in the zoning language here with a laundry list of things that are allowed there, would tell a developer, well, a hotel's allowed on that property.
Am I explaining this right, Jim?
I get what you're saying, Ken.
Okay.
Because all we're trying to, that's trying to be done, I think, by this agenda item is to initiate the process to amend the zoning code to allow that. And there's 3 ways you can do that. The Plan Commission can make a recommendation or let the council know that the Plan Commission has decided it wants to initiate the process of amending the code to allow that type of use. Okay? A petitioner can come in with a detailed plan and ask for an amendment, which we don't have. Or the Common Council on its own could do that even without your recommendation. So we're at of those 3 options, the first of those, and all what's being asked is that by motion you tell the Plan Commission that you want to initiate that change. It's up to the Plan Commission then to put together an ordinance to bring it back to you to start the public hearing process. And since you don't have any conditional uses in that zoning ordinance, you could create a conditional use section to address all of those issues that you're talking about, which you don't have, or you create this as an additional permitted use and then deal with all those issues as a part of a development plan, if you get to that point.
Because I would love to know if there's a definition of those places at hospitals, like the Ronald McDonald House. Is there a title for those type of buildings? I would feel fine putting that in there in place of number 11, hotel. Because I feel very comfortable that to date, there's no hotel on that property because it's never been on this list.
I would agree.
Okay.
Well, and there's no water, and there's no road, and there's no power. And
Well, there isn't for any.
There's a couple of,
But how many proposals have we had over there, and there is no sewer and water? We've had a lot of proposals over the years.
And so, I guess.
Some years.
Just as far as, I get where you're going with names and that, but there could also be a density restriction in B5, couldn't there be, with number of rentable units and things like that? I'm assuming.
Yeah, I anticipate us buttonholing this into something that is reasonable, right, and doesn't allow it without all these other qualifiers on it.
You're talking about the development.
Yeah.
Not this ordinance, this zoning.
No, but in the zoning, you could put a density limitation on it.
If we can.
We have a lot of tools in our
for every 20
toolbox that we
acres,
could
you
use.
can have 60 rooms.
But
Or 40 rooms.
We don't even know if the developer would agree to something that restrictive.
Well,
I'm not worried about negotiating with them. I'm worried about that either. I'm worried about putting on at least being open to the idea. And I think that's all we're doing here. And
I'm all right with that if we can put in some, what you're talking about, Ken, is buttoning up the development. I'm talking about buttoning up this zoning so
I'm saying that too.
Okay.
I'm saying
All right,
that
then I
too.
misunderstood you.
Yeah, I'm
There's a
saying that
way
too.
to make the zoning very restrictive.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm
To the type
saying.
of hotel we're talking about.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
If we can define that type of
And
hotel.
we need to go through this process to start that
Well,
conversation.
In order to get your answer, Dan, I think what we ought to do is get it up to the council, and in the interim, do that research necessary to get it, and then we have a public hearing. And if you define it as limited lodging, the terms and conditions to be determined at the next meeting, something to that effect, to get it up there, to get it back up to us. In the interim,
Because it's
then-
not final at that
Yeah.
point anyways.
No.
We're going to get it back.
Oh,
No,
absolutely.
I understand.
I'm just trying to facilitate it to get it
I
up
get
there and
that.
use the word limited lodging, terms and conditions to be determined at the next council meeting or whatever.
I'm all right with that.
For me, this is very premature, because I know at the last council meeting, Tom Hafner gave a report where he indicated that they applied for a grant and that there was 1,000 applications ahead of us for the Highway C taking down the hill. And this development and all the past developments have hinged on that roadway being revamped. If that doesn't occur, we've done all this for what?
That, that is one possible solution, and we went after that grant because we had the ability to do so. There are other solutions that have been proposed or discussed at a staff level to solve this.
TIF?
But specifically to the county's involved with that, right? So it's not
It's
just...
their property, not ours.
Yeah, I mean, so we went after, I'm just trying to clarify the grant thing, right? There are other avenues. We went after the grant because it was an option.
Right.
And everyone would benefit from it if we could go down that path. But, it's based on the number of applications, like you said, it's a pretty low probability, but we're trying.
I understand all that, but I think Laura makes a good point. If this development doesn't happen, we've added something to the list that I think a lot of us agree shouldn't be on there. What is the hurry?
Yes. Why aren't
Maybe
at
we
this-
see how far along this thing is getting and
Right. I
go
don't believe
ahead.
they've even been to sewer pack yet. Because for the B5, for the sewers, there's a process for that. I know that they meet 4 times a year, and that they even have a public hearing.
How soon do we have to act on the zoning change when it comes back to us?
There's no time
All right.
requirement in that
So,
regard.
so I don't, so we can defer moving, the developer on any property is going through a salmon ladder, and any
Yes.
single point in time,
I agree.
they cannot reach the next rung. And we can just have one, a parallel process that's set up. When they get to a certain point, we can act a little faster instead of having this 90 days out at the drop of a hat. Because we could line up 8 different obstacles that would make this never happen. So I don't see why, like I said, why don't we do this in parallel? We don't have to act on it right
And
away.
you're saying let it sit there until we...
Well, it's going to take us a couple meetings to
just to
digest
get it back to us, it's
these
gonna take
edits. If
60
we really want
days.
to pin it down, it's sort of like when we were
Sure.
trying to define fast food and other things like that. I think it's reasonable to get this rolling.
So if, just devil's advocate, if that development doesn't happen, how do we get, then this is not on the list, nothing was finalized.
Oh, it'll be
It
final
goes
when we
into-
voted
it
final,
never
up or
happened.
down. Yeah.
You're telling Common Council you want to initiate the process to amend the code to allow this type of use generally. Common Council says, okay, go ahead. They could give you specific language in an ordinance. They send it back down here. You have to set a public hearing. That's within your discretion. After the public hearing, you have to tweak any recommended ordinance, and you send it back to the Common Council. Or if the development has fallen through by that point, you can send it back to the council with a recommendation that nothing be done, because the whole concept has fallen through. All you're talking about is initiating the process. And, you may say, no, let's not do that. Common Council itself could initiate the process, because we all know, based on what's been going on. This is simply the first step if the Plan Commission is going to initiate the discussion.
So this is not the final language?
No.
No,
Gosh, no.
No, it's not.
So I mean, the only other option, what's the option if we
Those are
don't do that?
suggestions to consider.
You don't do that, if you don't do it, two other things. A petitioner could file a petition, initiate the process, or the common council on its own initiative could say, we're going to go ahead with it.
What about the option of tabling it till next month and coming up with a solution with Kathy's house?
Right.
And McDonald House?
Could do
I
that.
mean, if there's no rush or timeline and
No.
the developer's not here, then why couldn't we do that?
If you could do that.
But then if we do that, we don't want to come back and push it again. We want to have something concrete. So the research and investigation and due diligence has to be done. And those that want to oppose the hotel name, come up with some other name or concept, then come with it.
So one of the, in working with the developer at the staff level, one of the things they'd like us to do is have a process to help bring clarity to this issue one way or the other. And by running these in parallel, as Tim concurs, it gives us the most flexibility to meet their timeline, for what they've laid out. So that's the advantage to starting the process and then either slowing the process at some point, or deciding we don't need the process, or deciding that we do. But it's a 60-day wait, this process has to be, addressed. It's, we either do it later or we do it now. So by doing them in parallel, we're being more efficient for the process.
Well, I don't know what their position is, other than they sent a letter here requesting it be.
Well, don't tell me, tell them.
But, all I'm suggesting is to being sensitive to Dan's concerns. He wants to get that hotel off the list and have it some other name. Well, then let's do the research. It's going to be either now or a month from now. Either way, we're going to have to do some research on this issue, come up with a name and a definitive term.
It's not coming back here for a month. Once the council votes on it, it won't get to us for a month.
If you, so Jim or Roger, please go through the timeline if we were to take action to move forward on this option.
If the planning commission were to take action this evening to initiate the process, then this language or any additions or modifications you want to make to it would go to the council for their consideration. They consider it
this month.
Yes, at their next meeting they could be on it that soon. They then would, if they concur, send it back to the planning commission with direction to
at the end of February.
At the end of February to conduct a public hearing, and at that point
we schedule the public hearing.
So then we're talking March before we have a public hearing, and then after the public hearing, you can deliberate and modify the language and do whatever. Take into account
Get more citizens' feedback. We might make changes and need another month, right?
Yeah, exactly. This whole process is not unlike what we just did for building heights, considering Hendricks. The Hendricks building, as they ran in tandem, those two items through the approval process.
Well, I don't have a problem either way, but I know Dan's and Laura's have concerns about the name of the hotel, and if we want to, either you have to change the name.
It doesn't have to stay hotel. I mean, we can tweak that wording.
We could call it Associated Use Hotel.
Yeah, and I'm thinking there's probably a technical name for
Well, that's why if
right.
you check Kathy's house in Ronald McDonald, you'll have another.
But to come up with that language, we have to start the process so that we can do that. Okay, is there any more discussion? Seeing none, this is a motion to deny.
As a recommendation.
Did everybody hear what Sally said? She repeated the motion?
And move to deny inclusion of hotels in B5 zoning.
Everybody hear that? Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Abstentions? Passes. Okay?
So that was 2 ayes and the rest nays?
Yep.
And everyone voted?
I'm all right with it.
Thank you.
We'll get it done later.
I wasn't going to vote against my own motion.
I've done it.
Don't worry, we won't tell anybody.
I knew it would pass.
We won't tell anybody.
I'll make a motion to notify the Common Council that the Plan Commission is exercising its authority under Section 17.872 of the Municipal Code of the City of Delafield to initiate the process To consider a proposed change to section 17.3926B of the municipal code of the city of Delafield to incorporate hotel into the list of permitted uses in the B5 office and research commercial district, and requesting that the common council submits the proposed amendment back to the plan commission for consideration as required by section 62.23D1 Wisconsin statutes.
Second.
Second by Jim? Oh, Dave? Okay. Discussion.
Ditto, same argument.
We discussed it.
Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, Sally's asking for a quick 5-minute break, but we'll be right back. We've only got a few items left, and we'll come back and take care of those few items. Where's Roger? Oh. Okay, we are back. And we got everybody except for Roger. Jim's not coming back. Oh, Jim Meyer's missing too, okay. All right, so we are going back to the regular order of 6A, which is new business, items recommended for discussion and possible action, DELC 07489980002, 2565 Genesee Street, Delafield, owner applicant St. Michael's, Gillikin. Okay, that's it. Is the applicant here? Why don't you come on up? Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you'd like to do?
So, I am proposing that we put a sign out in front of the property in front of what used to be the Jehovah's Witness, and now is going to be St. Michael's
Could you
Church.
give us your name and address?
Sorry, this is Mitch Carroll, resident of Milwaukee, 2947 North Newhall Street.
Okay, are you a member of the church, or are you the sign guy?
I am the sign guy.
You're the sign guy, okay.
Yes, so Aaron's been working pretty closely with me to try and get this motion moving. It seems pretty straightforward that we're going to just be putting a sign up in front of a church. We abided by all of the ordinances to put the sign and the cross in the designated areas. And so I think I'm just gathering feedback so that you guys can move forward for public hearing.
Okay. Any of the commissioners have questions for the applicant? I think it's a fairly straightforward request. I believe you're recommending it for approval. Is that correct, Roger?
This property is governed by conditional use. I'm recommending that we move it forward. I'm recommending that we move it forward and schedule a public hearing to be conducted next month so that hopefully by the time the snow melts, we'll have a sign up. It's pretty straightforward.
Any questions for the applicant? Otherwise, we're looking for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to schedule a public hearing at the next Plan Commission meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Thank you very much. Okay, B.
They've been here for a while.
Yeah. 6B, DELC 0804-993-003, 3030 Gulf Road. Oh, I'm sorry, I went to the, is that the right one? Oh, it is. Okay. 3030 Gulf Road, Delafield, owner J&S Real Estate Holdings, LLC. Applicant Tina Weisgerber. Applicant seeks approval and amended conditional use permit and architecture for a building addition at the Holiday Inn Express and recommended the Common Council of the same. Is the applicant here? Yes, behind the pole.
The applicant actually had to take off. I'm here.
Hi, Chris Jackson, 8204 Pine Bluff Court, Darien, Illinois. I'm the architect.
Okay, and you've been here before?
I have.
Roger, any comments you want to start us off with?
Sure, because this property is governed under conditional use, we conducted a public hearing this evening before making modifications or approving modifications to their specific implementation plan. You may all remember that Holiday Inn is adding a workout facility that will be above the existing pool, and therefore they're not creating any further lot coverage on the property. As you may recall from the deliberations we had for the Chick-fil-A and the modification of the general development plan for the entire Nagawicca shopping center, the original conditional use regulated not floor area but lot coverage. Therefore, the increase in floor area that the Holiday Inn is proposing is really not applicable here, and they are maintaining the same amount of lot coverage, not increasing it. Therefore, they're not having any impact to the stormwater or the green space, and we can move forward with it. My recommendation to you is to consider approval of their materials are matching, the architectural style is matching. The only item that is somewhat unresolved is we had a very lengthy conversation last month in regards to the dumpsters that are on the north side of the building. The revised plan that we had requested to be submitted does take, you can see here the shed, which is a portable shed that they use for storage of their lawn equipment. They have voluntarily moved that behind the existing shelter, or not shelter, but the existing screen. However, you'll see that the recycle bin is still outside of the screen. I think ideally we'd like to see that recycle bin moved inside of the dumpster screen, and if it's not possible, if there's not enough space, since we have all the other construction happening here on site, I think we would like to see the enclosure expanded. In the presentation last month, as I explained, we discussed it. There was the motion to move this forward, conduct a public hearing. There was not specific direction in the motion to make this change. It was just a preliminary presentation, so it really didn't need to be in that motion. At this point, I would suggest everything here can be approved, but I would recommend your consideration, direct the applicant to put that recycling bin in the screen or expand the screen if necessary. And so as to avoid delaying them, I would suggest this is something you could defer to staff, but in the meantime, approve their modification, proposed modification, and recommend it to council.
So can you lose the parking space, or what can you do to get all that stuff in there, right?
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect, we're just trying to put an addition on the building. We really didn't have any plan or proposal for any of this stuff. The shed, I get it, it was unsightly, and someone had made a comment about it potentially being in front of a window. It's not. They moved it. It's been there it's been like that for 30 years. The recycle dumpster is required by DSPS. I know no one's complained about it before. The coals across.
These aren't good arguments.
No, pardon?
Not good arguments.
We were just sort of taken aback the last time because, we thought we had done this,
Well, whenever we review if you look at any of your neighbors.
Yeah.
Anywhere over in that corridor, or for that matter, anywhere downtown, we want the garbage things enclosed.
Sure.
Okay? So that we're not treating you differently.
Right.
This is an expectation we have of everyone, so.
Yeah. We can see what we can do. Putting it in, I don't know if it'll fit inside that enclosure. That recycle dumpster will fit inside that enclosure. I don't know what I'm
So
not.
that was the point of my question. Are you committed to losing a parking spot so that you can take care of this the way the planning commission asked you for at the last meeting?
It looks like there's room to go the other way.
Or go the other way?
No, there's a tree.
There's a tree in there?
There's a tree right there.
It looks like it's in a parking spot, so what would they lose?
Yeah, they already have lost
Yeah,
that
they've
spot.
already lost
It just all needs to be in an enclosure, right?
Yes.
Bottom line.
Yeah, the reason for this is, and I'm the one that noticed it, is that now we've got traffic going past that part of your building because of Chick-fil-A and the retail that's going to be there. And it's going to be very obvious as people go by.
Sure.
And it's just, we want it cleaned up. It benefits you also.
Also be advised that in this existing condition, this is a zoning violation.
Sure.
So it needs to be addressed.
Okay, we'll put it in an enclosure.
I'll make a motion for approval and recommend it to common council with the condition that they come back with, somebody's got to review the change that they'll make to the dumpster area.
Do you want to come back to this body, or do you want staff to do it?
I'll have.
You want to rephrase that motion? We're going to start over.
Yes, I know, it's the mic. I can't wear one. I will make a motion to approve to send to common council and for staff to approve.
Contingent on staff.
Contingent on staff to approve the dumpster area once it's defined
Enclosed.
and enclosed, right?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Yep.
I'm assuming that your recommendation for enclosing it would be to extend the existing materials and construction detailing of the existing screening.
I think staff would make
Staff can
that.
handle it.
That's
Take
okay.
up
Staff.
some of the grass, take the
We're
parking
confusing
spot,
things,
whatever you gotta
Roger.
do.
Too late for that.
The major part of it is brick now.
Right.
Yeah, and it depends how the trash is picked up, because I don't see one of those big trucks driving up to that trash enclosure. They pull it out by hand. So they may
Good
be able to
point.
fit them all inside there.
If they pull them out by hand, yeah.
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 All right, any other discussion? Roger, you're clear on what the expectations are?
I am absolutely clear on what the
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on 6C, DELC 0786.998, 1600 Genesee Street, Delafield, owner Christ the King Church of Delafield Incorporated, applicant Sign Effects Incorporated. Applicant seeks preliminary feedback for a directional sign program for Christ the King Lutheran Church and schedule a public hearing. Come on up, gentlemen.
Evening. I'm Josh Brown from SignFX.
Jerry Spencer, 935 Pointview Road, Oconomowoc.
All right, Roger, you want to give us a little overview?
Sure. This is for Christ the King Lutheran Church. I hope we are all familiar with where it is.
We vote there.
That's directly north on the east side of Highway C. The church, as all of our churches on campus settings, are governed by conditional use, and as such, Plan Commission is required to consider things in a preliminary fashion, which is what we're doing this evening, and then scheduling a public hearing for action the following month. What is being proposed is directional signage throughout the campus. I think it's very well designed. It's appropriate. Its location, it's interior lit. For wayfinding, I think it's very critical that it be lit on the interior. All the signs except one are oriented for vehicle traffic. One of the signs is mounted so as to give information as entrance to the building for the daycare. Previously, Mr. Gross stepped to the microphone to share with you his opinions about my recommendation in regards to the size. The ordinance is what it is. In regards to others non-conforming signs, there may have been reasons the Plan Commission approved what they approved. But in this case, we're 50% larger than what these signs are allowed to be. And I think if you take a look here at the elevation, these signs that are oversized are the signs right near the entrance that give direction for access for the parking. As you can see, the one on the right has an awful lot of void space, and the one on the left identifies parking twice. They can easily be downsized, just remove the parking. So it has all God's children with an arrow and church entrance with an arrow. You could easily downsize these without inhibiting someone's ability to read them. And then we're consistent with the ordinance. With that consideration, I would encourage you to schedule a public hearing and move forward.
What do you think?
Yeah, you look a little concerned there.
I'm opening this one up. What do you think?
You know something, I'd like to respond to that.
Please do.
Mike Gruhl addressed the fact that the ordinance is really not that clear, and frankly, it isn't really that clear. I want to say that what we're trying to do is interior directional signage. You don't really cover that situation. You cover directional signage, but where 8 square feet is mentioned in the code in one location, it's section 1766, paren 9, paren A. It says that you should also refer to this, to section 1767, paren 1. which talks about arched tops, sailboats, and mastheads of the city. What the first reference really talks about is a strip mall. It allows businesses under this terminology and the 8 square feet to have an 8 square foot sign on a master sign that's out by the road, very much like you find on Hillcrest Drive at the Walmart shopping center. This is not what we're trying to do. What we're really trying to do, but let's say that we were a strip mall just for a moment, and we had 5 businesses, we'd be allowed 50 square feet of signs by 40 square feet, 5 times 8. But we're really just trying to help people find their location and the direction to 5 locations. We don't want 40 square feet. We want 12 square feet. And what we want to do is we want to identify 2 accessible parking spaces, 2 entrances to the church, and 1 entrance to daycare. Now, if we were a strip center, we would have a big coal sign on the point of arrival. We're just trying to get people to where they should be. We have 116 cars in our parking lot, but it's diverse. We are trying to help people not be confused. We have disabled parking, accessible parking in 2 separate locations. The point of arrival is just about 50 feet inside the property line. So right away, we have to separate the traffic and get people going in the right direction. When people are coming into your facility with a turn immediately off of a busy street, and then you have to turn again immediately, compromising on letter size is something that really is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make the church accessible to people. We don't think that the reference of 8 square feet, which only occurs in that one location that I mentioned, is in fact at all appropriate. There is no property that I've found in Delafield, and I've driven around it pretty carefully, that I can find any interior lot signage directing people how to go. There are signs that say, if this is private parking, don't park here, or we'll have you towed. And frankly, even there, the letters are so small you hardly read them, but you know what it says. So, one, we don't think that the ordinance really does pertain to what we're doing. We think that what we're doing is in fact a unique experience in the city. And if it was interesting, when I heard that this ordinance was being applied to our application, I tried to do a layout of the sign, and I found that the only way I could do it with 8 square feet was to reduce the signage by the letter size on the major sign by 17%. 17% may not sound much, but think of this. That short entry that you have coming into the church has 3-inch letters on the application. You reduce it to 2.5, you have 83% of the signage. But what that does is it reduces the good impact from 30 feet to 25 feet. It reduces readable distance from 15 feet to 12.5 feet. So a reduction in the letter size is extremely harmful when you're trying to communicate with people who are driving a car and moving. This reference really comes from the sign chief. That's something that you'll find online if you look at what letter sizes there are and where and what they should be for distances. This is really an effort to help people. And believe it or not, it isn't just the church. The church happens to be a polling place, and because we have handicap parking in 2 different locations, it's helpful to let people know where they might be able to find that parking. That parking is located as close to the entrances as we can. That's why we put it in 2 locations, and that complicates what we're trying to do. We think that our request is a reasonable one. We're happy to answer any questions you have, and I turn the table over to Josh.
I think you summarized it pretty well, Jerry.
I think you did really well.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add unless there's questions about the specifications towards the actual signs.
Well, I'll make some constructive, size aside. You do have a lot of words on the church entrance, all God's children parking, church entrance parking, and the arrows are really small. I would make the arrows larger and get rid of some of the redundancy to make things clearer. You're talking about readability. The number of words, I think, would be a suggestion regardless of how big the sign is. So I'm not sure. It looks like you've got 2 church entrances. One's for just parking and one's for. Anyways, but I think that sign could use some clarity. I'm not really that hung up on the size. I'd love to stick with the code, but there is without changing font. There's ton of border space on these signs as well, and I think aesthetically it'd look better, and that's probably why the 8 feet limitation is in our ordinance. Is just from a less signage, more green space, and I think you could keep the font size and probably trim these down. And
I suspect if you remove parking, you could make the font size of church and all God's children larger.
So it sounds to me like you've got, your position is number 1, this ordinance doesn't apply to you, and if it does, you want an exception to the rule, correct? Would that be fair?
I'm sorry.
1, the ordinance doesn't apply to you. Number 2, it does, but give us an exception. And 3, we're trying to provide an alternative that meets within what you're trying to get people's attention to go where they have to go, but in a meaningful way, consistent with what is applied, at least in a general sense, through this ordinance across the board.
All I know is, from a readability standpoint, this is the message we want to communicate. It cannot be communicated effectively in 8 square feet.
Okay. Have you had some complaints by all your parishioners or voters about this? Have you had complaints from the parishioners and voters who go there about this issue?
Money has been donated for the signage. Do we have comments from the?
Complaints that they can't see it.
We don't have it existing, so how can we?
No, I mean, in terms of, have you showed them what you're doing, the plan?
No.
Okay.
I think that we have been entrusted to try and do something that is readable and workable, and we're trying to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's what we're trying to help you along that way. I'm not trying to dispute it. I'm just trying to figure a way to do it within our rules and our ordinance.
I don't think that your rules apply to this situation.
I got that.
Well, this is a preliminary presentation. You can give the petitioner or the applicant direction, but I would encourage you to schedule a public hearing regardless.
I'll go with what I said. I'd look to see if the fonts would work, same size. Get rid of some of the redundancy and make the arrows bigger. See if you can take a swing at meeting the ordinance. We want you to be able to navigate your parking lot. You guys put a lot of money into it, and I appreciate the update. It looks great. It's a big improvement over what you had. And so if you need the signs, I think we can get you the signs. But I'd like consider the arrow size and maybe getting rid of some of the redundancy on the one size and see if the other ones can be trimmed and present what you're going to present, and come back to the public hearing, and I'm sure we'll do the right thing.
Thanks for all your time.
Thank you.
We're scheduling a public hearing.
Yes, looking for a motion.
Motion to schedule public hearing.
Second.
Was that everything we needed, Roger?
That's everything we needed in regards to scheduling a public hearing. Since Plan Commission has asked you to take a look at this, how fast can you turn it around, Josh?
A revision of the drawings you asked?
Yes.
How fast can we turn it around?
Yeah, because we have publication requirements in order to get on the March agenda. We're going to need that by Monday.
By Monday?
Yeah.
Okay, that can be done.
Okay. And question for Mr. Spencer. Do I understand Soul Fire is open today?
It's been
It
open.
was open last week.
Was it? Okay.
It's been very public the last couple of days, having 7 features on one channel today and one yesterday, so it's being noticed.
Congratulations on a great job on
Yeah.
that.
Nice
Congratulations on a nice
Yeah,
job.
you need to be really commended, thank you. It's outstanding, outstanding.
It looks wonderful.
Do we have a motion we have to vote on?
Yes.
You did.
Assuming there's no more discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes. Okay. We are on to the last item on the agenda, 6D, DELC 0807985-013, 3708 Kettle Court East, Delafield, owner Rally LLC, applicant John Barker. Applicant seeks preliminary input regarding a parking lot. Roger, you want to start us off, please?
Sure, I'll be more than happy to. The issues before you this evening actually as an enforcement action. Stuffed Puffs, which operates in Mr. Barker's original building, which is on Kettle Court East, has a need for more parking than what they can accommodate on site. In response to that, a parking lot was built on the vacant lot immediately west of the building. That vacant lot is owned by, I forget the owner.
Scott Tannis.
Well, it's Scott Tannis, but it's a LLC.
Rally LLC.
Rally, there you go. On a vacant parcel owned by the property that's even further west, this Tannis building. So Mr. Tannis allowed them to construct the parking lot. Once the city became aware that the parking lot existed, an enforcement letter went to Mr. Tannis and coordination began immediately with Mr. Barker. We understand the necessity for the actions that were taken. Weather was getting bad. The end of the fall was beginning to get wet. So they put in the parking lot knowing that they had to come through and actually do the work and get the approval. Well, that's where we are today. Mr. Barker has submitted to us a site plan in cursory review of it and in coordination meetings with Mr. Barker. It's understood that we would like to see the site plan developed as per development code, which means we need to have lighting and its photometrics. We need to have landscape screening to satisfy the requirements for the parking space. But more importantly, is that this, even if Mr. Barker were to satisfy all the zoning code requirements, this is an ancillary use that sits alone on a vacant parcel. Parking lot is ancillary to whatever uses are approved. So in order for that issue to go away, the cleanest thing to do would be to combine this vacant parcel with either the Stuffed Puffs, Mr. Barker's building to the east where the Stuffed Puffs is, or Mr. Tannis can combine it with the lot that his building is on. The decision's been made to consolidate this lot with Mr. Tannis's building to the west. They can create a lease agreement for the neighbors to use the parking lot. They can, the employees of Stuffed Puff can park their cars on a separate lot as long as it's within 400 feet of their operation. And all of this can be done with Plan Commission's approval. I recommend to Plan Commission to encourage Mr. Barker to present the necessary information that are identified in both the enforcement letter as well as reiterated in this report to you this evening, and file that along with the certified survey map application for further actions so we can approve both lot and the CSM at the same time.
Joining the CSM.
Yeah.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
How do you like that?
I think it's great.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your consideration. I mean, you guys have always been good to me. It was a situation that came up because the previous building, the first building that I built in 2012, which is leased by Stuff House. I still occupy some of the space in there. They ran out of parking. They literally have a need for a lot of employees to handle the product in order to package it. And they hired a lot of people, employ like 60 people, I believe, during the shifts that they change over on. And because I built the other building that we spoke about tonight, that's the Gun Club deal and all that, that building was the ability to allow me to move a lot of my operation from the first building at 3776, where Stuff House is, and move it into the new building on 3875. And then that opened up more space for Stuff House to lease from me, which will allow them the opportunity to then incorporate some high-speed, sophisticated packaging, and then eliminate the need for some of those employees they were having to hire, which put that need for that extra parking that didn't exist. Summertime, they were just parking on the street, which to me, it's not nice. I mean, it's, sure, can it handle the street parking? There's no signs. I don't believe it's against code to park on the street, but up and down the street was just, it looked like an eyesore. It was ridiculous. You got semis coming in and out of there from all different businesses, my own people, all the other ones. It's a hazard. And you park cars and people walk in between cars. It's a safety issue. I looked and said, there's a vacant lot there, Scott. You park your boat on it in the wintertime. I've seen other people park on there. Can we park on it? Absolutely, John. No problem. We're good neighbors to each other. And then, of course, we had an early winter. It snowed in October. Everything got muddy. During the summer, we had not bad times, but we put down a nice mulch and made it nice. It was great. Lasted all that time. Well, then, of course, winter came, and now you've got a problem. And you know, they were stuck and everything else. And I'm like, well, we can put a temporary parking lot up in there. So we brought in 8 inches of TB one day and put in a parking lot, rolled out 2 inches of traffic bond, and rolled out 2 inches of binder coat, and put in a nice parking lot. It's a good parking lot. I mean, it supports everything we were going to do in there. And so therefore, then I'm like, well, Roger, I didn't realize that wasn't something I could do. It's temporary. Well, what's temporary? Define it. I'm like, what's temporary? I don't know. A year? I don't know. 2 years? I have no idea. But then Roger said, well, let's make it a permanent deal and join the thing. And it's okay, fine. And that's fine. So that was just, that's like kind of the long story of it. But, you know, I didn't think it was a big deal to put the thing there. And I should probably say why I didn't think it was a big deal, because there was a driveway that I paid for one of my neighbors. Right on Highway 83 and Hillside Drive, if you're familiar with that spot, the bad stoplight, there's a driveway that goes up there. The family, they're obviously have a lot of kids and a lot of mouths to feed, and they don't have the means to pay for a driveway. And I'd go through there every day with my cars, and half their driveway would be out in the street because it was a washout every single time. And I personally, and I bet some of you probably seen me out there blowing their driveway back up on there and sweeping it back up onto their driveway, because I certainly don't want to ride a motorcycle through there with all the gravel. I don't want to ride my bicycle through there. I don't want to see somebody wipe out and get killed right there. It was brutal. And Laura is shaking her head. She knows. So
I know.
She knows exactly what I'm talking about. So you know what? God's been good to me, like beyond my wildest dreams. And I said, you know what? I got a buddy that owns an asphalt company. I said, Roger, is it okay if I paid that? Yeah, sure, no problem. You sure? I don't have to pull a permit? No big deal. So I did. So my buddy went out there and he put in 160 feet of asphalt, and I paid the bill, and happy times for them. And now they don't have to worry about their car getting halfway stuck up the driveway because it's a pain. So that's why, if you wondered, well, why the hell would this guy think that it was okay for him to just pave a parking lot because I didn't think it'd be a big deal. I mean, really? Come on.
So we're here to fix it.
So we're here to fix it. And Roger was kind enough to walk me through the steps and be very gracious about it. I was a little ticked off about the letter, I'll be honest with you. I felt a little strong-armed by it, but you know what? You guys are here to enforce laws and rules and regulations, and I'm here to abide by them and just do my thing and have some fun. And that's it.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
I think you took care of it. Yeah. No questions.
All right, then we're looking for a motion.
I might add that we did put in the parking lot lighting and the screening.
We're recommending that he move.
It doesn't ask for a motion.
Oh, recommending that he move, we're giving him feedback, right? Along with the plan.
Provide feedback if there's anything else that you'd like to see him provide.
Well, you're talking screening, like some screening already, right? With some way, it's just.
It's a vacant lot. And
I know
it's
what
already
it
got
is.
the, I mean, I can put
So
around and obviously meet up to the asphalt and put in standard seed and whatever, and it'll be just good filtration, and it shouldn't be any issue at all. You know, CG
I'd say-
Engineering did the planning on the.
We're gonna see a plan then coming back to
Yeah,
us.
coming back.
So, yeah, just, you said Roger's gracious, use that grace to get a good plan and we'll move it forward.
I think it's all right, it's fine. You told me what I need, it's just whatever. Should be
Yeah, just
standard,
put together a plan so we have something in the record.
standard netting, whatever, is seeded and done, right?
Put some screening, not just landscape.
Arborvitae's, is that what
No,
you're
deer eat
referring?
'em.
Screening, meaning, I mean, if I'm gonna put in a driveway, I'm gonna have asphalt, and you're gonna have a 45-degree angle, and you're gonna put topsoil up to the edge of it, you're gonna seed it, and that's gonna provide proper, you know, allow it to.
We want a little bit of screening to hide the parking lot from the road is what the ordinance requires.
Oh, screening, like a
Screening.
fence?
Yes.
No.
No,
A hedge.
A bush.
Plants.
some bushes.
Plants.
Shrubs.
Hey, if
You're a
I do
landscaping
that-
guy.
Hey, if I do that, I could utilize some of that as some of the offset for the trees that I can't very well plant.
Don't go there yet.
Why not?
Moving right along.
Okay. All right. So we're all square? You understand what the planning commission feedback was?
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you for
Yeah,
coming.
yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You said you had minor surgery today. Were
Yeah,
you the
thanks for
patient
the wait.
or were you the surgeon?
Yeah, I should be the surgeon, or what I was the patient.
Okay, we're gonna move on to number 8, reports of city officials. The clerk, planning commission meeting dates and deadlines. Meeting February 26, 2020. Meeting submittal deadline, February 11th, 2020. Public hearing, submittal deadline, January 26, 2020. Refer you to any correspondence in the packet, and then planner's report.
The only thing I have to report is just public information, and that is those people in the audience, all 3 of you, and anyone at home, if you are anxiously awaiting to see the Hendricks proposal, we are anticipating that they will be submitting to be on next month's agenda.
Okay.
Can't wait.
Great, thank you very much. Building inspector, last but not least.
I have nothing to add.
Oh, Lordy.
You've been waiting all that time.
All right,
to say
seeing
that?
no further business at 9:57, we are now adjourned.